Oh. Jaime.
Yami.
Ready? I'd like to call to order the Avalon City Council meeting of June 1st. And the council will be acting as the Avalon Municipal Hospital Board. We could please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Wait, I'm sorry, I forgot my mask. Where's my mask? Put your hand over your heart and begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'm sorry about that. And just would like to say, let there be peace on earth, and let it start at the council meeting this evening. That's all. So Joe, we will be limiting the seating in here a little bit.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And then maybe as people have spoken or whatever, if they want to leave, that would be good to make room for somebody else. Okay, I'm sorry, roll call, Denise?
Councilmember De La Rosa?
Here.
Councilmember Lavelle?
Here.
Councilmember Ponce?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Cassidy?
Here.
Mayor Marshall?
Here.
And for the record, Scott is also present.
Excellent. Announcements and communications?
I have received a lot of items of communication regarding item number 8. 105 of them are formal written protests that were either mailed to the city or hand-delivered today. I received an additional 190 emails from various property owners regarding it, and then 26 that were not valid because of they either didn't give me their physical address, I don't know what property it was to, or they were tenants, and or no names. So.
Okay, that's a lot of communication. All righty. If nothing else, department head reports?
Good evening, Bob Greenlaw, Director of Public Works. Got 4 items to report out. We're still continuing weed abatement. It's supposed to be finished today, but because we had some saltwater breaks and all that the last couple of weeks, we're slightly behind, but we're going to, within the next few days, we'll be done with that. So we're trying to keep up with our piece of that work in the public spaces. As you notice, we put some beach sand down again. It wasn't as robust an effort as normal in year, but also the cost, and that's the reason we did it. The cost was much less. We just got some sand out of the building supply and put 6 loads in there, and so hopefully that spruced it up for everybody, so there's a little more sand. And we're done with that project. And then the ATP, so our active transportation plan. I reported out several times that the city is completing an active transportation plan which focuses on improving pedestrian and bicycle modes of travel within our city. We're compiling the results of our walkability audits, and we've asked others to join us to do that, but we desire to have some more input, and we're getting down to getting those results done. So if anybody wants to provide input, contact me at bgreenlaw@cityofavalon.com, and I'll take in those comments for you, make it real easy for you to submit comments. So the type of comments we're looking for is, what are some of the areas that cause you problems as far as walking or biking, and what are maybe some of the areas that or concepts you would have solutions, toward some of that. So, and that helps us get that community input. Any questions?
We got 4 things that quick. Wait, hold on. Hold the phone. Come on back. That was 4?
Oh, sorry. I was going to speak about the other one, but the harbor master, he's going to speak about the mole crane.
Okay, so I have a... Go ahead, Michael. Okay, so I have a question. I know that it's being queued up at some point, that stop sign, and this is a law enforcement issue as well, but the stop sign in front of the Buddy Wilson's golf cart rental place that was going to be moved back by the
Yes, it is.
Conservancy?
Yes.
Okay, and then at the same time, our city bus is stopping in front of the Conservancy office to pick up people. So now you got golf carts, you got their tour buses, you got people coming down the hill. I don't know if there's a better place to stage the pickup of people than.
We're evaluating a different location, Mayor,
Okay.
to still have it centralized.
Oh, great, thank you.
And as far as the signs, remember that I had reported out that we're doing street markings, they're queued up, also the curbs, and then our signs at the same time, citywide.
Great.
So you'll see those come on pretty quickly here.
Excellent. Any questions for Bob? No? Okay.
Nice and clean, thank you. Okay, good evening, Madam Mayor and members of the City Council. So as you know, this Memorial Day was a very busy weekend for most of us. Patrol noted an overall increase in the number of boats being moored as well as anchored at the casino anchorage. And here's some important stats. Patrol moored 407 boats for a total of 1,407 nights. We only had 2 medical assists and a handful of warn and advise, which is really good news. But we provided public assistance to 43 vessels, of which included 6 tows of broken down vessels, and patrol responded and helped secure 13 vessels that had wrapped up in the mooring lines. Weather was definitely a factor, as we had southeast breezes occur daily over the busy weekend. Like Bob said, we are doing a repair and refurbishment of the mole crane, which is a really critical piece of our infrastructure on the mole. We started that at the end of May. We have Canby Mechanical, who's heading the job on that. And we expect to be down till about June 15th. Everything is going as planned. The winches are being rebuilt. The motors are either being replaced or rebuilt, and all the hydraulic hose lines that pertain to the pieces of equipment that are being upgraded are all being dealt with. So this is a long overdue project, and I'm glad we're checking it off the list. I want to give a quick shout out to a couple of the businesses that really made things go well for us and made my job a lot easier. I want to thank Eddie Vega for keeping the trash moving and the dumpsters empty. This was no small task, as we didn't have a trash boat running over the weekend, and Eddie basically took on all that extra work. I also want to thank Scott and Sharon down at Catalina Coastal Tours, the shore boats, as they did such a good job keeping everyone moving and providing excellent service to the boaters. And last, of course, I want to thank my crew, who handled a number of complex situations as the wind and tide and other challenges with the visiting boaters. Everyone had some sort of challenge, but they were able to handle all of that. And of course, this is, we come out of a COVID year, so it's like I was saying earlier to Lisa, you know, we were cut back and slowed down and reduced, and then you open up the floodgates and it's on. So there's definitely no slowdown in the harbor.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's all I have.
I have a question. So the shore boats run, what are their hours? Do you know?
They run till
night hours.
Yeah, night till 2 a.m.
Is that 7 days a week now?
No, not during the week, but it's not busy enough at this point, but it will as of July 1st, when the season really starts.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And that 1,407 nights included what nights?
That would be, so our weekend really starts Thursday. So the onslaught would be Thursday, and that would include Monday. So all the way through, that's our busy
Friday,
weekend.
Saturday, Sunday. So 5 nights?
Yeah, people get a jump on the weekend, and they come out, and yeah, that's, so that all of those nights that you said.
Okay, great. All right. Thank you. That is great.
Okay,
Yes,
thank you.
Thank you. Any questions of our harbor master? No? Okay.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and members of council. Captain Joe Badali from the Sheriff's Department, and happy to report that we had a quite uneventful Memorial weekend. We had 10 additional personnel that were working out here with us, 8 of which were Sheriff's volunteers, which was basically the 8 volunteered themselves to be here at no cost to the department or the city. And 2 deputies were assigned to work the concerts under a special entity contract with the Island Company.
Right.
So with the additional personnel as well as our regular staffing, we only had 2 isolated incidents that involved domestic violence, and no other issues to report or unusual incidents.
Great. Are we having any luck with those electric bikes? Has law enforcement been able to stop any of them from running through stop signs and not wearing helmets and that kind of thing?
Yes, we've had several encounters already with not only the motorized bikes, but just the bikes that are being rented throughout the community. And we have a number of warrant advised issues that we had contacts with. And I've seen a bit of an improvement in how our locals are riding the bikes, especially the minors. They're wearing their helmets, and I have seen just a better enforcement of that and compliance.
Right.
I've seen a lot of minors riding the electric bikes that don't have helmets, and then they're also got the person on the back of the bike, and they don't have a helmet on.
Okay.
So if we could just keep an eye out.
Yeah,
for that,
certainly,
yeah.
certainly will.
Yeah. Any questions of Captain Badali?
I was just going to ask, when Captain Hawking was here, the request had been made to have an active shooter drill, and that hasn't taken place yet for council. I was wondering if you might be able to coordinate one for us to go through, please.
Yeah, the city manager and I have discussed that,
Okay.
and we will be planning one very shortly.
Thank you.
You want to wait till after summer?
No,
Realistically?
we'll do it,
Yeah.
probably, we'll arrange a
Yeah.
time and let everybody know.
Right. Well, good. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
One more question, sorry. A couple meetings ago, they had mentioned that we were going to do body-worn cameras before summer started. Is there any update on that?
So the sheriff had mentioned by end of summer, and I don't know the exact timeline that we have. There are some issues that we have, being that we are on the island, some interface, microwave that needs to take place between the island and the mainland that I know is moving forward, but I can get an exact timeline down the road and provide that for you,
Good.
Thank you.
certainly.
Okay. Fire Chief?
Good evening, city staff, mayor, and council. CPR tomorrow night. We have about 6 signed up, and thanks to Marissa today, Marissa Morones, she got us lined out on the recreation website where you could pay online in advance. They don't have to bring a cash or check. So we'll put that out tonight for the next class, and if they show up tomorrow, they could just sign up online while they're there and pay online as well. Weed abatement, June 1st, so we'll be going around checking everywhere. I've been getting some calls of people that have asked for, they've shown me like a work in progress, so we're going to go around the next few weeks and check weed abatement everywhere. Inspections are starting up. Occupancy letters, the last week before the weekend, I hit a couple of businesses. I didn't hit them all, but I gave them a warning of occupancy load, fire exits, and everything, and make sure their numbers were posted. So we went out and did that before the weekend. We were out at Descanso Saturday for the concert, and Descanso did a great job, their staff, of putting up new no parking signs. But at one point I felt so they were so mean to Trish, we had to go out and we got with code and we wrote a bunch of tickets because they were brand new, freshly, no parking, fire lane, and they were super rude with their, and so they all got tickets. Which leads to parking. I've been talking to a couple of people that are repeat offenders of parking in places they shouldn't, so we're still working on that. And then next Tuesday, our fire drill is going to be marine firefighting with Baywatch and Harbor. So there's going to be about 3 or 4 days throughout the month of June that we're going to be doing some marine firefighter training. So there'll be a little bit of smoke coming from a boat, but there'll be about 4 days of that. And that's all.
So what was the final, remind me about the heaters on the beach? I forget.
That the heaters, at the last council meeting, the heaters could stay on the beach through June. And then the heaters, though, that the chief has requested that the propane tanks, the extra ones be removed by the stage, as well as at nightly to be removed from the heaters themselves. And that's for safety reasons. And
Right. And they've abided by that? Everybody's cooperating?
When we've gone down to look, they haven't been there.
Okay. I did notice today that there was 4 heaters around a palm tree and they weren't secured at all. There was no rope or anything. That was earlier today.
which beach was that, Mayor?
The one closest to your work.
South Beach?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we just asked that they remove all the tanks because with the curfew being in effect, nobody was downtown. Now everybody's downtown and they're drunk and, oh, it's cold, look, let's light the heaters. And if they leave them on and the gas sprays out, that's one of the reasons, that's the reason why.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's great. Any questions of our chief? Okay, thank you.
While Matt's coming up, I just want to thank the chief and the harbor master for not touching the podium. And also I want to thank Code, if I could. They are doing their job. I think I might have been a minute or two too long parking a cart, and I got ticketed.
Yep. Oh, now you're supposed to take a picture of you with that ticket and it goes on the wall of shame back there. Mine's on that wall as well.
Evening, council. Hands in the pockets to try to protect the podium. I'll be presenting later tonight on the cost of service study, but I did want to provide council with an update on the city's budget. Right now, the plan is to have the first study session as part of the June 15th council meeting, with the goal to then schedule a subsequent follow-up meeting with the goal before June 30th so we can get the budget adopted before the start of next fiscal year. So again, the goal with the study session on the 15th, and then we'll be reaching out to see if there are dates available between the 15th and the 30th for a second meeting to hopefully adopt.
Right. And that budget, when will that budget be put online so if people want to comment to that?
So the goal would be to have that to share to council and the public, or at least the proposed draft by June 10th, I believe. It would be the Thursday before the 15th council meeting. So June 10th would be when that draft proposed budget would be available.
Okay. So people out there, pay attention, because we're trying to give you as much, you're getting as much notice of this as we are. So please pay attention, because I know you're out there listening now because of the other things that are on the agenda today. So thank you. Thank you, Matt. Right. Any questions of the, no? Okay.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the council. Community service, just with a few updates as we get into June. We're really excited. We've got some programs coming back. Beach Bingo starts back on the 15th, Tuesday and Thursday night, starting June 15th from 6 to 7 on South Beach. Once again this year, it's $1 per bingo card. Our kids fishing derby is going to start back on Wednesday, June 23rd, Wednesday mornings from 7 to 9, 2 age groups, different prizes for the age groups, and that'll run throughout the course of the summer. We plan to have the water polo cages in the water mid-June, so in the next couple of weeks, balls will be available. Check out with the lifeguard and/or at Island Rentals. Currently, we're taking registrations for our summer day camp, which starts back on June 21st, Monday through Friday from 9 to 3 throughout the summer. Movies on the Beach will be back starting, our first one starting June 23rd. Do I have that right? June 23rd, the Croods. And then we're going to run the 2nd and 4th Wednesday of the month, Sonic Hedgehog, the Hedgehog on 7/14, Little Giants on 7/28, and then on 8/11, Frozen 2. So we've got those posted on our website as well. July 4th, a July 4th celebration. Yes, we will be having a home and storefront decorating contest. Yes, to the golf cart parade this year. Yes, to live music throughout the day. We'll have that posted here in the next week. Yes, to the fireworks sponsored by the Johnson family. No, too, we've got a lot of questions about it. The USC band is not going to be here this year. We just needed to make a decision much earlier in the year. It was in December, January, we had to book rooms for it, and there was just too many unknowns. So they're on notice. They're not here this year. We hope to have them back next year, but I just want to make sure that that's publicly said. And then lastly, we just got another nice donation from the Catalina Island Yacht Club for our skate park. Our skate park, I think I mentioned last meeting, is seen as much use as any of our facilities, just because it was one of the first things that was opened up. Outdoors, you could spread out, and it had been going as one of the first parks as early as the parks were open. So with that came some wear and tear. With that, they've already donated $5,000 to get some new pieces of equipment in there. We've got another $5,000 from there. We're going to get a couple more pieces, and then we're going to work with some of our local artists. We've got 3 artists. 2 of them going to put panels throughout the skate park with some graphics on it, as well as on the sides of the ramps. And then we're going to work with our own Jen Diaz to do some kids panels that can be changed out, frequently on a quarterly basis, probably on a quarterly basis, where she'll have dates where the kids can paint the panels, tag them up, if you will, and then, with some primer, we'll white them out and do it again in 3 months. So something we're looking forward to. So with that, any questions?
No. Any questions? Okay, thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
Lots going on. Okay. City manager report?
I just want to reinforce that we are now having vehicles, the vehicle hearing person, excuse me, Mayor, let me start all over. We have new vehicle hours at City Hall on Monday and Wednesday morning only now from 8 to 12 because the demand is really decreased and we needed to get code enforcement out there on the road all the time. So we do have code enforcement out 7 days a week, and commuter subsidy is still by appointment, and that's from 1 to 5 Monday through Thursday. City Hall is still closed on Fridays.
So is there a time where we even reduce those hours in-house for permits and stuff? Or there's too much going on? Because now it's not, well, there's still a lot of late people, but when somebody comes in and they're doing business and they want to bring in a vehicle, does it take a code enforcement officer to issue that, or do we have someone else at the desk?
No, it's the vehicle, same consistent, we want to have one consistent person that's handling all the vehicles, and that's Miguel, and when he can't be there, then Ephraim steps in. So those two are really following all the protocols that we have established.
Yes, great. Okay. Anything else, City Manager? That's it. City Attorney?
Nothing tonight.
Michael Palmer, you're not on the list, but do you have anything you'd like to add?
No, thank you, though.
Okay. Council members?
Can I go?
Yes, please.
I'm going to do the proclamation.
Oh, you want to do that now?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm going to read a proclamation from the City of Avalon. A proclamation of the City Council of the City of Avalon, recognizing the month of June as LGBTQ Pride Month. Whereas the City of Avalon cherishes the value and dignity of each person and appreciates the importance of equality and freedom, and whereas all are welcome in the City of Avalon to live, work, and play, and that every family in any shape deserves a place to call home where they are safe, happy, and supported by friends and neighbors. And whereas the City of Avalon denounces prejudice and unfair discrimination based on age, gender identity, gender expression, race, color, religion, marital status, national origin, sexual orientation, or physical attributes as an affront to our fundamental principles. And whereas Pride Month began in June of 1969 on the one-year anniversary of the Stonewall Uprising in New York City, after LGBTQ+ and allied friends rose up and fought against the constant police harassment and discriminatory laws that have since been declared unconstitutional. And whereas the City of Avalon appreciates the cultural, civic, and economic contributions of lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer plus community, which strengthen our social welfare. And whereas it is imperative that young people in our community, regardless of sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression, feel valued, safe, empowered, and supported by their peers and community leaders. And whereas, despite being marginalized, LGBTQ+ people continue to celebrate authenticity, acceptance, and love. Now therefore, be it resolved that the City Council of the City of Avalon declare the month of June 2021 as LGBTQ+ Pride Month, and urge residents to recognize the contributions made by members of the LGBTQ+ community, and to actively promote the principles of equality, liberty, and justice. Dated this first day of June 2021. And on a personal note, I would like to thank my fellow council members for their continued support for the LGBTQ+ community. It's very well appreciated. Thank you.
You're welcome. That's very lovely. That's very nice. Thank you. Okay, other council members? Yesenia? Anything to report?
Thank you.
Cindy Lou? Cindy, Councilwoman?
I don't have anything to report other than a shout out to all the city staff who worked so hard this weekend, cleaning the streets, picking up trash, fixing the few minor urgencies that happened. So much appreciated. The harbor was about the busiest I've seen in years, more side ties than we've seen in quite a few years. And so a shout out to all the harbor patrolmen for their hard work. And of course, Captain Badali and his team for a wonderful weekend. I saw lots of service throughout Front Street and around the community over the weekend. And shout out to the fire department as well. Thanks you guys for helping us through this crazy busy weekend. And that's all I have.
Okay. I would like to shout out to the local VFW for their wonderful memorial service up at the cemetery on Monday, and a special shout out to Cal Parsons, who was very intense in his presentation of his experience in Vietnam. You could visualize what he was talking about. It was crazy wonderful, but it was very sad. Anyway, he did a great job, and Enrique and Angela sang, and anyway, it was great. And Cindy, you probably know this, but maybe you're forgetting, and if I'm talking about something I shouldn't be, but I'm going to say anyway. We got notified by Assemblyman Patrick O'Donnell's office. Mayor Pro Tem nominated Paul Daniel Romo as Teacher of the Year, and I nominated Jonelle Ewert, and they were both accepted. So I think 2 Saturdays from now there will be a Zoom presentation. So congratulations to Paul and congratulations to Jonelle. We're very proud of you. I mentioned to Denise and about a possible vehicle meeting. I know that doing some kind of a big survey is going to take a long time, and it's going to, it's not going to be done this year. But I think there's some things that we can start to really talk about amongst ourselves, get code enforcement involved in the meeting, perhaps the sheriffs and staff, of course, and council, to talk about some things we might consider that might be solutions going forward. And if there's consensus on some of these things, that would involve staff looking for some of the remedies that we might come up with. So if you all are in favor of having something at some point after budget and all of that, I think that would be good to kind of get that going, especially in line with all the projects that Bob has for multimodal and safe streets and all of that kind of thing. So, and I'm leaving tomorrow. I'll be gone for 7 to 10 days, so everybody can still reach me by phone, but I'm going to be fishing on Sunday at Port Aransas with my daughter. So thank you. Okay, presentations.
Okay, we have Professor David Valentine from UC Santa Barbara. He did a presentation at the Chamber board meeting last Thursday, I believe, and he was invited to come to this meeting to talk about the DDT contamination on the San Pedro Basin. There he is. Hello, Dr. Valentine.
Hello, thank you for having me. Flag me if our connection gets bad. It's been a little bit glitchy so far. My name is Dave Valentine. I'm a professor at UC Santa Barbara. My specialty involves deep ocean research, and some of my study sites are just off the coast of Catalina and both the San Pedro Basin, which is between the island and the mainland, as well as the Santa Monica Basin, which is the topographic depression to the north of Catalina. Now, about 10 years ago, I came across a waste area that had been used for dumping. Turns out back in the 1940s and 50s and into the early 60s in the San Pedro Basin. And this was used by Montrose Chemical to dump the slag, which is the solid material that was a waste product from the manufacture of DDT, which is a pesticide that was banned in 1973 or 74 by the US EPA after the book Silent Spring by Rachel Carson. It is very much a forgotten history, or at least it was, that this dumping had occurred in this way. And it was supposed to be dumped originally north of Catalina, out in the Santa Monica Basin, and apparently the company that was doing the dumping decided that they would take this solid material, which was supposed to be in barrels, and dump it between Catalina and the mainland, right smack in the middle of the San Pedro Channel. It's about 3,000 feet deep down there, and that's where we do a lot of our research. And so we came across the site, began to study it for several years, including taking samples of the sediment of the seafloor to see the amount of DDT and other chemicals that was in it, and there was quite a bit. Some of those samples were higher in concentration than the Palos Verdes Shelf, where there's a well-known Superfund site. And so the history of this is that Montrose Chemical was doing that dumping in the 40s and 50s into the early 60s. And there was a report written to the water boards in the 1980s that estimated that there could be as many as 500,000 barrels down there. It certainly was not difficult for us to locate barrels when we went down into that area. And then more recently, scientists from Scripps Institution of Oceanography, our sister campus down in San Diego, they did a survey using remote acoustic methods, and they identified 27,000 some odd objects that they think are barrels, among about 100,000 total man-made objects on the seafloor, in an area of about 150 square kilometers between in the San Pedro Channel, all down in that very deep portion. And so that's I would say the short version of what we know. And then where we are now is that we're trying to scientifically, at least those of us in the academic community, figure out how we're going to begin to address the many unknowns that are still out there, like how much is actually there, what each of those barrels really contains, how long those barrels will last before they decompose, and most importantly, has that material or is that material working its way into animals? And so we're working with Senator Feinstein in particular, and other groups and agencies within the state and federal government to try and develop a scientific plan to begin to answer some of those questions. And so that's the sort of brief version, and I thought it would probably be better for me just to address questions that people might have about this. There's quite a bit out there, scientific papers now, a couple from us, as well as a lot of media reports, but I figured I could just try and help any way I could to address questions.
Dr. Valentine, thank you for being here. My name's Annie. I was on that call that you did a couple of weeks ago, and a couple of the questions we had was one, and you explained it very well, about the eagles and the DDT with the eagles and the fish, and then also about the fish that we consume.
Yeah, so the caveat here is that I am not an expert in fish or eagles. I know something about chemicals in the environment. And so I will start there with the fact that DDT, it doesn't dissolve into water. It likes to go into the fat tissues of animals if they consume it. It won't go through the skin. And so it has to find its way into the ecosystem through the food chain. And in the 1980s in particular, there were a series of studies showing that eagles across Catalina were suffering from serious eggshell thinning. And I imagine there's folks there that know much more about this than I do. There's a series of papers that were written about this. There was a lot of egg swapping that was done to try and get the fragile eggs out and put in either dummy eggs and then bring the baby eagles back later, or put in healthier eggs. And so the issue, though, was that as far as I know, nobody has figured out yet how that DDT was actually getting to those eagles. And part of the issue is that the known problem on the Palos Verdes shelf isn't likely to find its way out to Catalina. And the other issue was that the fish that had become contaminated at Palos Verdes were mainly the bottom fish, which are not usually the ones that the eagles can see and hunt. And so, as I understand it, there's always been a bit of a mystery about what was causing the eggshell thinning. Well, DDT was known to be causing the eggshell thinning, but what was causing the DDT accumulation in the Catalina populations? And so, it's something that we're thinking about if there's a link between what we observe down deep, because we don't really now know the bounds of where that dumping occurred. And I sort of skirted over that, but the Scripps survey showed that the dumping wasn't really within the area that it was alleged to be, that it exceeded those bounds. And we don't know where that really went to. And it certainly could have come up into shallower water. So that's, I guess, what I would say about the eagles. In terms of fish, there's a number of fish that are on the list of things not to consume on the Palos Verdes shelf. But I'm not familiar enough with DDT accumulation in other areas to have much to say. There are groups that look into that, and that would definitely be a good question for them.
But you did make the comment in that when we talked about it that down 3,000 feet, there's very, very little oxygen, and so you really wouldn't find fish down there, down that low, correct? So the swordfish, they're finding at about 1,000 feet, but they probably never go to 3,000 feet.
Yeah, that is correct. And so it's a quirk of the geology of California that the basins, including the San Pedro Basin and San Pedro Channel, it's down there at 3,000 feet, but it's sort of a bathtub. And you can't you have to go up and over the edge of the tub to get out into the open ocean. And so as a result, the oxygen concentrations get very, very low, and they tend to be less than 1% of the atmospheric value. And so that's just too low for any large animals to survive. And so there's really no fish down there. I've been down there many times by submarine and ROV, and there's not a lot of life down there. There's microbial life, there are worms and a few other things that can handle the low oxygen, but you don't see fish, and there's not a real active food chain for something like swordfish to be finding food. So I don't think that there's an immediate concern of that DDT finding its way into fish that people are consuming. But there could be a longer term route by which it gets into worms and then eventually sort of spreads its way out into other things. And that's something that we're trying to test. We're trying to understand. But I don't have a lot of concern, particularly about the migratory fish that move up and down the coast.
Do you have any questions coming in, Michael? And then we also have the council.
I don't have any questions at this time.
Council questions?
Dr. Valentine, this is Lisa Lavelle. I want to thank you also for joining, and thank you again for presenting at the Catalina Tourism Authority meeting. The one thing you just touched on briefly, if you could elaborate on more, a lot of people originally when this was brought up and in the papers were concerned about the safety level for swimming and human use of the water for sports and activities. Can you just touch a little bit on that and kind of what you covered in the last call as well, please?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. The short answer is that there's no concern for swimming, boating, scuba diving, surfing, any of those things. There's DDT. The concern is with the ecosystem and with it getting into animals. It does not dissolve in water, and so there's really no concern whatsoever at all with any of those sort of waterborne activities. It doesn't go through the skin. It doesn't even dissolve into the water. So it's not a concern whatsoever at all.
Thank you.
Any of the other council have questions or comments? Anybody in the audience have a question? Okay.
When are we going to have the bees on the saltwater feed?
Where did that come from?
That's at the end. That's one of the items on the agenda tonight.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. I couldn't tell who was talking. Okay, if there are no further questions of Dr. Valentine, we want to thank you. You've given a lot of clarity to the questions that have been asked in the community, for sure. So thank you so much, and good luck in all your research.
Thank you very much, and I'll see you on Catalina next time I come out to be a CME camp counselor.
Excellent.
Thank you very
Come
much.
on out. Bye-bye. That was great. Okay, oral communication. This is an opportunity for people of the public, members of the public, to address the council on items that are not on the agenda. You will be limited to 2 minutes and no action will be taken. So, Joe, would you go out and see if there's anybody out there that wants to deal on items that are not on the agenda? Oh, there's nobody there at all anyway. Coast is clear? There's no one outside. Okay, thank you. All righty, consent calendar.
I do have one comment.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I have a comment from Jim Lutyahan. He writes, in honor of Pride Month, Love Catalina and many members of our community are working to celebrate. Among the activities and additions are lighting of Catalina Casino in rainbow colors, altered Love Catalina branding to rainbow variants, and hopefully a Pride Walk, tentatively slated for June 12th at 1 p.m., beginning at the Wrigley stage, subject to approval. Show your pride and welcome our island visitors who are also celebrating this month.
Oh, that's lovely. Thank you, Jim. Okay, consent calendar.
There are 7 items on the consent calendar this evening, and one of them will be the hospital board, the City Council acting as the hospital board of trustees. First one is minutes from the May 18th, 2020 regular City Council meeting. We have warrants for a total disbursement of $656,580.99 for the time period of May 10th through May 21st. Third one is to adopt a resolution notifying the Los Angeles County Board of Supervisors of the city's desire to receive specified law enforcement services from the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Office, and authorizing the expenditure of COPS grant funds, and authorize the city manager to execute the service level authorization form for fiscal year 21-22. Fourth one is to make the affirmative findings that conditions set forth in the Avalon Municipal Code have been met, and grant the waterside project application to M.O. Dion and Sons Incorporated, DBA, Avalon Harbor Fuel Dock, with the following conditions: that all operations to load and unload general foods, general goods, foods, beverages, beer, wine, and ice can take place on the Avalon Harbor Fuel Dock. And 2 is the applicant abides by the standard list of conditions for waterside permit holders. The 5th one is to authorize the city manager to enter into a lease agreement with MMW Hospitality Corp. for the city-owned outdoor property at 615 Crescent Avenue, known as the Pancake Cottage Patio. The 6th one is to adopt an ordinance of the City of Avalon revising Article 6 of Chapter 3 of Title 9, Planning and Zoning of the Avalon Municipal Code, amending the definition of minor renovations to reduce the threshold to allow certain minor projects be administratively processed. The 7th one is the Hospital Board of Trustees, and that is the CEO's April 2021 report and the CFO's March 2021 report, and we're asking you to receive and file the reports.
Council?
Mayor?
Yes.
I would like to pull item number 4, please.
Yes. Anything else to be pulled? It is nice to report, though, that our law enforcement services agreement was reduced a little bit, so thank you. That's every penny counts, so thank you. Or helps. Okay.
Then I'll make a motion to approve items 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, and 7.
There's been a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay.
Councilmember De La Rosa?
Aye.
Councilmember Lavelle?
Aye.
Councilmember Ponce?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Cassidy?
Aye.
And Mayor Marshall?
Aye. And just for the record, correct me if I'm wrong, Yesenia wasn't at the meeting, so she should abstain from the minutes, right?
That is correct, Mayor.
Okay. You got that? Yeah, that minor.
Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, Cindy?
Okay. Item number 4, the reason I pulled this is that typically we only entertain applications for waterside permits in the month of December. And so this one coming to us in June, I just wanted to ask if the harbor master could give us a little bit of background on why we're seeing the application now.
Yes, and that is correct. So the normal process is for us to gather up all the waterside permit applications, and then I put them together and make the staff reports and then present them to the city council in January of the new year. And typically the reason we do this is we want to deter any fly-by-night operations coming in, want to open up a ice cream cart. They come in May, and then they put that together, and then they come sell ice cream and take the cream off the top, and then they're gone in September. And so the way our process and our protocol work really well for us. The reason I support the application now in June is because Dion and Sons and the RFP all started in the new year, which really didn't give us a chance to discuss everything that they wanted to do. And one of the things that we found out they wanted to do is they wanted to enhance the delivery business side of having their convenience store there. So I believe it would be good for this application to come before the council for your review, and that it would enhance the services available in the harbor. As you can see, Dion and Sons has come into the harbor. They've already lowered fuel prices, which I can't remember anything going down in this town. And they've committed to something that was in their original RFP, and they're already making a great effort to make great changes and a commitment to our community. That's why I support this. They're not going to be a fly-by-night operation. It looks like they're here to stay. Any more questions?
And how long is our contract with them? Pretty long.
Yes.
Yeah, years and years. Okay.
And I just want to say, in our municipal code, it only states about the renewal of waterside permits are in the month of by the month of December, but nothing is about new applications. It's always been a matter of policy internally. And as Oren said, there was a mention of it in the RFP, as well as we were so busy working on their professional services agreement and their lease that this was forgotten.
Great, thank you very much. With that explanation, I will make a motion to approve the waterside permit for Dion and Sons.
I'll second. Yesenia seconded.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, if there's no comments, okay, call for the vote, please, Denise.
Councilmember De La Rosa?
Aye.
Councilmember Lavelle?
Aye.
Councilmember Ponce?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Cassidy?
Aye.
And Mayor Marshall?
Aye. Item number 8.
Evening, Council, again. I just wanted to provide Council with a quick overview. The city has received a number of public comments on the topic. I have not read every single one, but I did my best to read as many as I could before the start of this meeting. And I thought it would be helpful if I started with a brief presentation that focuses more on the why. And then I also have Sean Korn with HDR Engineering here to give a brief overview of kind of more of the how we came up with the numbers involved in the cost of service study. And just a couple items. Again, I'm just going to try to go over the comments I read to try to address them. But again, if there are any questions from council or the public, I'm happy to answer them as well. Just one of the things I want to point out is the sewer, saltwater, and solid waste charges are user charges rather than a tax. And I know it's semantics to a lot of people, but the key difference there is 100% of the payments or the charges that we receive for sewer, saltwater, and solid waste go to providing those services. So the assessments we charge don't pay for fire, they don't pay for the harbor, they only pay for those services. And that's what makes them different from a tax. We do utilize the county's property tax roll process in order to expedite the billing of it. It costs the city about 25 cents a parcel per billing, which is a great resource to the city to be able to utilize the county property tax process. My understanding is prior to my time at the city, and I think it happened a few years before as well, we used to have to manually bill and manage the collections process, which is a considerable undertaking for the department. So going through the county property tax process is a great benefit to the city. But I just wanted to clarify that this isn't a tax, it's a user charge, and that those charges that we are using are going to pay for those services and not other things at the city. Another thing I just wanted to provide an overview is just on the timeline of this process. At the March 16th meeting, Sean Korn gave a presentation providing council with an overview of the cost of service study process. We met again at April 6th meeting where we gave a second presentation, and that was where we had the discussion and vote for a public hearing here on June 1st. We then mailed out Prop 218 notices to all parcel owners using the mailing address that was on file with the county assessor. So of the 1,477 notices mailed, we did have 103 returned due to insufficient address information. Again, we used the county assessor's mailing address on file for those mailings. On April 15th, we also updated our city website at cityofavalon.com/assessments to include copies of the prior presentations as well as rate analyses. We also updated our database that would allow property owners to go in and look up what the proposed rate increases mean for their individual properties. At the April 20th, May 4th, and May 18th meeting, During the department head updates, I reminded the public of the public notice scheduled for today and directed them to the website as well. And then lastly, on May 21st and May 28th, we did include notices in the Catalina Islander reminding the public of this public hearing. We tried to be as transparent as possible through this process. And we tried to make the information available not only in the meetings, but through the website, as well as through the Prop 218 noticing process. So I want to just quickly touch on saltwater. So saltwater, we did have a proposed rate increase of 2.5% a year over the next 5 years. Really, the design behind that was to keep pace with inflation. What I have on the left is showing that the latest CPI figures from the federal government show CPI in the LA area for the 12 months ending April of 2021 was actually 3.6%. And so I really just want to show the public that we're really just trying to make sure we're keeping our costs in line with inflation. Our contracts have CPI clauses tied to them, and so we have to, at a minimum, keep our costs aligned with CPI to make sure we're not falling behind what the appropriate rate should be. And again, the goal with all of these enterprise funds is that the users of the service are the ones that are funding 100% of the cost to operate. And so that's why we have to make sure as our costs increase, those increases are passed along. And that again comes down to, for saltwater, $6.80 annually and 56 cents per month in the first year of the increase. Again, with sewer, we have had some major capital outlays in the past few years to try to maintain our aging infrastructure. But really the driving factors that kind of differentiate for the sewer fund between the last cost of service study done 4 years ago and the one we're presenting tonight was our contracted services for the management of the wastewater treatment plant, as well as our utility costs associated with that, increased significantly beyond what we had estimated in that prior cost of service study. So you can see our wastewater treatment plant contract, which was renegotiated, I believe, in 2019, showed an increase of $180,000 from where we had estimated it to be as part of that last study. And then similarly, our utilities bill increased significantly from the last study, and those are really kind of the driving factors. In the last study we had, that was the 5-year study that was adopted by the council at the time, had a planned 3% rate increase in that study for this upcoming fiscal year. So fiscal year 22 would have been the last year of that study. So in that study, we had a 3% increase, and what we're asking for is a 7% increase in the current study. And so that increase is really just to cover those additional contract service costs and utility costs. Really, if you look at the amount spent, say at City Hall or labor of city employees, it's been relatively flat, increasing with CPI over the 5-year period. So it's really these kind of two outliers, as well as our capital costs that are really driving the rate increase. And again, in the sewer fund, that rate increase, at least for the first year, would be $5.09 per month. Solid waste, I think this is one which rightfully got the most attention, and so I just want to provide, again, a little background on where we spend money in our solid waste fund, and really the 3 factors that are driving the proposed rate increases. So city staff and overhead make up less than 10% of the total spend in the solid waste fund. As you can see from the graph, the vast majority of the proposed spend comes from our sanitation contract, so that would be for the collection and management of the landfill. Other major costs include the post-closure funding, which I'll go into in a later slide. So as you can see, the initial increase that was proposed was 19% in the first year, which breaks down to $9.09 increase per month, which is less than a Netflix subscription. The proposed increases are really being driven by three factors that I want to go into in a little more detail, which hopefully explains the reason why we're having to increase the rates to the level that we are. So in September of 2016, the state of California set methane emission reduction targets as part of statewide response to climate change. So as part of that, Senate Bill 1383 directed CalRecycle to adopt regulations to divert organic waste from landfills. So there are several key components that CalRecycle put into effect as part of complying with these targeted methane reductions to lessen our impact on climate change. And those regulations are set to take effect beginning January 1 of 22, so in this upcoming fiscal year. So the city is currently working with our contractor to ensure compliance with those requirements. Mike could speak better to what those specific requirements are better than I can. But in general, what it is, it's going to be a pretty significant change to our collection process. Currently, we have a two container collection process with waste and recycling, and we would have to shift to a 3 container process where we would be separating organic green waste in a separate collection bin. Again, nothing has been ultimately decided, but in discussions with our contractor, in order to have that 3rd collection process, the expectation is that there would be an additional truck, an additional crew staffing that truck in order to meet those collection requirements with the 3rd bin. CalRecycle does have the ability to fine jurisdictions that don't comply with these requirements, and those fines are set at $10,000 per day, so that'd be over $3.5 million per year of non-compliance. But this is a major impact, at least as far as the cost of our contracted services. So again, this hasn't been formally adopted, but we're expecting the cost to increase by $275,000 for collection services, and that roughly is 12% of the entire solid waste budget in the current year. So you can see this one change alone would require double-digit rate increases just to address this piece of it. And again, my expectation would be that contracted service would have CPI adjustment factors for the remaining 4 years as well. The second major component that's driving the significant increase in solid waste has to do with the required landfill closure and post-closure funding. So based on the most recent estimate, the city's landfill has 7 years of remaining useful life. The landfill closure and post-closure costs currently are estimated to cost approximately $4.7 million a year, plus annual inflation adjustments. So by the time the landfills close, that figure is over $5 million. The landfill trust, we do have a trust account where the city has been setting monies aside specifically for these closure and post-closure costs. That trust account has a balance of approximately $2.6 million, with annual contributions of between $268,000 and $350,000 planned as part of the study over the next 5 years. So again, the last study did not include any pre-funding of the landfill closure costs. And so while we have been funding the landfill over the past 4 years, those were really unplanned costs that we've been drawing from existing landfill reserves in order to make those contributions. So the city is looking at what its options are to extend the life of the landfill, but with everything there's a cost associated. Right now, what we believe the most cost-effective method to extend the life would be attempting to extend the permitted height of the landfill. We think if we were able to be successful with this approach, we could provide an additional 7 to 10 years of useful life at the landfill. There is an extensive permitting process involved, and again, Mike could speak to that side of it better than I could. But essentially, we're looking at an estimated cost of approximately $300,000 split over 3 years, so $100,000 for the first 3 years. And that's also a component driving that increase in our landfill expansion costs. And again, one thing to keep in mind is that once the landfill has reached its capacity, waste will be required to be barged off the island, which it's our expectation that would also considerably increase the cost to provide solid waste services for the town. So to summarize on the landfill, there's really 3 components, and they're quite large in dollar, that are driving that increase. It's the organic waste, the unfunded mandate to reduce greenhouse emissions. It's the funding of our landfill trust, and then as well as costs associated with pursuing avenues to expand the useful life of the landfill. And again, if we go back to the slide, most of the costs we have currently in the solid waste fund are those contracted service costs and fees associated with funding the post-closure costs. So if we were to look at other city costs, that makes up a relatively small percentage of the overall spend in the solid waste fund. And so then lastly, what if we don't increase rates? So this is again assuming we don't reduce the level of service or defer any needed capital maintenance. We would draw and exhaust all of the existing reserves in the 3 fund, and the general fund would be required to subsidize any unfunded amounts. Again, you can see year over year what those amounts would look like, and we currently do not have $6.9 million in reserves in the general fund to be able to cover that. So if we weren't to increase rates, really our only option would be to significantly reduce the level of service. So with that, I do have Sean Korn, who's going to give a brief presentation on kind of more the process behind coming up with the numbers, but if there's any questions from council now, we could answer them now, or if we can finish the full presentation.
I might have a couple questions.
Matt,
wait.
Oh, sorry. Annie, go ahead.
No, I have a couple, but I'll wait till after it's all over.
Oh, okay. I do have a question. Where are we with recovery of funds for services not received during the beginning few months, 6 months of the pandemic?
Would defer to Mike on that.
You're talking about the solid waste?
Yes.
The city's worked with CR&R, and we received credits towards street sweeping, and there were some other ancillary things that they have done, but I'm not aware of any other efforts.
Okay, so there was, as you remember, we talked about many times, there was lack of service and pickup of trash in general. So are we still negotiating that, or just from street sweeping? Is that where they gave credit for the services not received from trash pickup?
They had, I guess I'm not quite understanding where they were not collecting for that period of time. I know there was several issues regarding the street sweeper, and the street sweeper, we did receive a credit for the times that it was inoperable. We did also receive some credits for some of the bulky item pickup issues that we were having, and then the city sent out a letter requesting a cure for some of the issues that we had ongoing for some of the negligent trash pickup on there, but they had provided a response and a cure for that. We worked with the city attorney's office to address those issues.
And to what Cindy was saying, I mean, I sent you guys pictures of trash that wasn't picked up, and also notified you of days where
so I'm just zooming in on what Councilmember Cassidy was asking about, and that's when there was a transition between, they had 2 different managers during that time frame, and city staff was working very hard to rectify all the complaints that were coming in. But as far as did we adjust, or did they adjust their pay then? No, that didn't happen, other than we were determined to rectify the continuity of the trash and who was looking out over the landfill. And so we do have a very great person that we are in constant contact with once or twice weekly. And his name is Mike Silva. So since then, I didn't think that there's been any issues. We have our own little issues in the alleyway as far as grease and people not using the compactors correctly. I think that's what you're referring to, Cindy, just during that time frame when we had different managers and like nobody was minding the mill. So
it was several months, and I believe the city is owed credit for services not received. And so I believe that I have emails back and forth between city staff and myself where we talked about this, that they laid off most of their employees at the onset of the pandemic and didn't bring them back until it was, I believe, more closer to the busy July weekend, 4th weekend, if not after that. And so I feel the city is owed some sort of compensation for services not received. This may not be the appropriate time to discuss that or what that amount might be, but I would not like it to get swept under the carpet that they did not provide a service that we paid them for.
And I can definitely speak to you offline, Cindy, if you have any questions regarding their contractual obligations. That is something that we worked through and got them back into compliance, and I can share everything that the city had requested in regards to that.
But I think the question is, was there any compensation for them not doing?
And we're saying no.
Okay. Because I think there should have been compensation back to the city for them not doing their job.
Okay.
I can think of a hotel right above where I live that had to call a couple of times to get trash picked up. I had to call a couple of times to have trash picked up. Eucalyptus Gardens, walking out and finding the bins overflowing the walls, that we had to have them come out and pick up trash because they hadn't picked it up on the regular day. So and it wasn't just like 1 week, 2 weeks. It was a good span of time when things were shutting down and things were reopening.
And my last comment on the subject for tonight would just be that those employees that were retained during that time were so overworked and so overwhelmed, and I saw them every single morning and at least gave them some kudos for the fact that they were doing the very best that they could with the quarter staff that they would normally be working with. So I definitely want to get a shout out to those that were still out there trying to do the best they could.
Well, and then to add to that, if they're down 3 or 4 employees, a lot of what their budget is personnel. So I would think, I don't know how much they get paid and what their benefits are, but if they're always down three staff people or whatever, that's a substantial amount of money. And then remember last time when they were so busy, they were just throwing everything into the landfill and they weren't sorting. And that was what part of that letter that went out a while ago, you know.
It was, and in terms of contracted minimum number of staff, their contract does not include any clause in there that requires them to have a certain minimum. Some of our other contracts do, but I'm more than happy to speak on that at a later point.
All right, thank you. Sorry to belabor that. Okay.
And again.
And I'm so sorry. Can I ask Matt Baker one more question? On the graph for the solid waste, the pie chart that you had is suggesting that the salaries and benefits are 3%, but that actual, what it looked like on the chart is that 3%? Is that
So there's really 2 numbers to think of, and I tried to color code them similar. You see the light green and the dark green. So the light green is the salaries and benefits, and that's of city personnel. Currently, we do charge a portion of our 2 code enforcement officers' time to the solid waste fund. And the rationale behind that is when they're out in the streets, they're patrolling the green bag compliance program. And so that was the rationale for the code enforcement's time being charged there. The darker green, the internal service, that's where we charge the solid waste fund for finances time for administering payroll, cutting warrants for those personnel, doing the accounting and finance for it, as well as the city manager's office time for managing that contract. And so those would be in the darker green internal service. So if you combine the two, kind of the city head overhead charges, if you will, make up about 9% of the total proposed spend in the solid waste.
Okay, so then what does it say on the orange slice?
The dark orange is the dark orange or red is the post-closure funding, and so that is the annual contribution amount we make to the trust account, again, to close that difference between the 5 million we need saved and the current 2.6 million we have saved. And then the orange slice, the lighter one.
For some of us, you can't see the lines very clearly, so I'm sorry. That it looked like the salaries and benefits was 3%, and that was the red slice. It just looked odd.
No, I see what you're saying there.
Yeah.
So again,
I'm good.
And one thing I do want to remind council is that really this rate amount, whenever I'm making these assumptions, this is based on the information we have at the time when we adopt the rate. If we were to be able to, say, reduce the contracted amount, again, we don't know what the full cost of the expanded service will be. We use the best estimate we have based on those conversations, but we do have the ability in future years to reset those rates. We're really setting kind of the high limit of those rates. So right now we're estimating there's a 7-year useful life, but if we, say, have better diversion success and that landfill's life goes from 7 to 8 years even, that would spread out the cost of that. So when we are setting the rates tonight, we're kind of setting the high end, but if we are able to achieve savings over the course of the next year, we can factor those in and go lower potentially, not saying that we necessarily will be able to, but we'd have that ability in future years when we bring it to council.
Well, then let me ask my question now. So, but what if we come up with an alternative to turning garbage into electricity or whatever? I know those projects will cost money, but are we giving up on maybe some alternative? Because 7 years and then another 7 to 10, we're still going to be in the same place. How do we look at alternatives?
We are looking at alternative strategies. There's a couple things that we're looking at. One of them is engineered municipal solid waste, so basically shredding all of our inorganic garbage and then converting that to energy. We're looking at anaerobic digestion and a couple other things. Obviously, all of these strategies take time, they take money, and they take other resources. We are looking at those as a more of a formal strategy. What we're trying to do, though, with the permitting is get the lowest hanging fruit, buy us some additional time, and hopefully allow us to pursue funding mechanisms and other things in order to implement some of these other ones.
Great, thank you, Michael. Any other questions of Matt? Okay.
So then I'm going to hand over the presentation to Sean Korn with HDR Engineering, and he's just going to give a very brief overview of kind of the process to come up with the increased amounts. All right, Sean, I have it pulled up.
Thank you, Matt. Good evening, Mayor and council members. As Matt said, I'll walk through a brief presentation. You've actually hit on a lot of the key topics or issues as Matt went through his presentation and some of the questions that were asked. So slide 2 talks about the purpose of the study, and that is key and was hit on as enterprise funds. The rates and the revenues must equal the cost. That's the definition of an enterprise fund, as a self-sufficient fund to provide these services for sewer, salt water, and solid waste. That includes both the operating and maintenance expense, as well as any capital that is necessary to continue to provide service. Now, one of the components and a key component of the development of the rate study is developing proportional and cost-based rates, and that's a requirement of Proposition 218. These are all property-related fees as part of Proposition 218, and so we need to meet that requirement of having proportionality between customers. So why does it cost one customer different than another customer? And that's all based on the cost of service analysis and how each different customer class benefits or utilizes each of the three utilities. As we go through this, we also want to make sure we reflect prudent financial planning criteria. So this is simply A, covering our costs for O&M, making sure that we have a funding plan in place to meet our necessary capital improvement projects, so to continue to provide salt water to customers, continue to take sewer away from homes and businesses, and be able to treat that. And then ultimately maintaining any adequate cash reserves as part of the study. So we go through this process based on generally accepted methodologies. We have a couple of manuals the American Water Works Association puts out, as well as the Water Environment Federation, but those are specifically tailored around your city's customers and characteristics. So that's how we make sure, as Matt was talking about those different costs, we've incorporated those, as well as in the cost of service, we're making sure that we're following generally accepted principles while meeting the requirement intent of Proposition 218. Slide 3 really tells us the process of how we do that, and it's a 3-step process: the revenue requirement, cost of service, and rate design. The revenue requirement outlines the total amount of revenue for each utility. So all these pieces that you've been talking about prior to this, the overall cost for operating and capital, that's what builds up to that revenue requirement. And so as a whole, for each utility, we need to have a certain amount of revenue to meet those operating and capital expenses. Once we know that, then we can develop the cost of service, which equitably and proportionally distributes those costs to each different customer type. So when we think about how a single-family home uses salt water, sewer, or solid waste services versus business, and that can vary from a small office to a restaurant to a grocery store, or even to some of the multifamily hotel complexes you have in Avalon, then there's a difference in how they use the system. And that's the point of getting at for Proposition 218, so that each customer is paying their equitable share of costs. Once we know those first two pieces, then we can design rates so we can collect that level of revenue from each customer class based on the results of the total system needs, as well as each individual customer group. So I'll start off on slide 4 with just a brief summary of each of the revenue requirement analyses for each utility. We started off with the fiscal year 2021 budget, and then we projected that out into the future through fiscal year 25-26 based on the changes we've seen historically. So we work with Matt and others to look back at what those cost changes were, and then ultimately build that process forward to project costs. As Matt mentioned, we're adopting maximum rates for each of these time periods. So based on those assumptions we built in. For solid waste, you hit on the 3 big key issues that are driving those rates: the funding of future closure costs, the unfunded mandate, and future landfill expansion costs. On the capital side, we have current capital plans to make necessary improvements to each system. Sewer had a higher driver of infrastructure investment needed than the other 2 utilities, which is fairly common as we think about the saltwater component and the solid waste component. And then attempting to meet as best we can all of our financial targets and metrics. So we wanted to make sure we were funding our O&M, we were funding our capital, and then how we maintained an adequate minimum cash reserve level. So the next slide provides us with a summary of the sewer revenue requirement. So this builds up for each year, the first bar being our first budget year, so fiscal year 2021, and that the gray bar is the total O&M, the red is existing debt service, and the blue is rate-funded capital. So you can see in 2021, our revenues meet our expenses. As we go out over the projected time period, we see some changes, with the dashed horizontal line being current revenues and the solid horizontal bar or slightly increasing based on proposed revenues. Really, that increase is driven by ensuring sufficient funds to fund those capital improvement needs over this 5-year period. So we may put some money into reserves in 1 year and then use it the following year to pay for capital projects. The blue component is that rate-funded capital line. And so that's there to fund those annual improvements on an ongoing basis. So based on the overall change, the total system revenue adjustment is 7% for fiscal years 21, 22, and 22, 23, followed by 3.5, 3, 3. So that establishes that maximum rate under this Proposition 218 process. So this includes that capital funding piece, which is one of the key drivers for the sewer utility. On the next slide, we have the solid waste utility. Same setup, total O&M plus taxes and transfers. That taxes and transfers is actually the landfill closure component. And then we also have a little bit of reserve funding that we're using as we go out to time. So you can see that uptick in that line based on the need to get revenues up to fund in fiscal year 21-22, part of SB 1383, as well as our landfill closure costs, and then out into the future as that continues. So that results in the need to increase revenue in these first 2 years by 19.5%. Followed by 9.5% and then 3%. Again, overall system totals, but will also be reflective of the rate adjustments in each of the years for customers. And then finally, the saltwater study, again, fairly similar, same components, but you can see here where our lines are much tighter, much closer. That's the 2.5% per year. You can see we're funding in the blue component, the third piece of the bar going up. Our adequate capital renewal and replacement needs, that's our rate-funded capital component, as well as putting money into reserves to use in subsequent years to fund capital improvements. So overall, essentially an inflationary level adjustment for saltwater. And then to summarize, Matt hit on this a little bit in his presentation. This is the overall average customer bill. So your single family home or your residential sewer bill, solid waste bill, and saltwater bill. You can see the change here in each of these, about $5 a month per year for sewer, saltwater, that big jump, and then that levels out as you get out into the out years. And then about 50 cents or so for the saltwater per month per year as part of the study. So now that we know the overall revenue needs and the overall system adjustments, then our next step is to move into the cost of service analysis. And as we go into the cost of service analysis, we go through and look at how each customer class or each rate schedule customer impacts the system. So we did utilize the same approach as we did in the prior study, but it's been updated to reflect current customer and system characteristics. So based on what we're seeing currently with how the customers are using the system, how the systems are operating, and those costs associated with that. As we look at sewer, it's based on an equivalent unit. That's an industry standard flow assumption by different customer types. So looking at how each different customer type utilizes the system and the wastewater flows that are sent back to the city's collection system based on those industry standard measures. On solid waste, it's based on the trash generation estimates by customer type. So how much trash is generated on the typical single family home, for a multifamily complex, for a hotel, et cetera, based on that information. And then saltwater is very similar to the sewer side, where we base that on customer equivalencies based on how each customer type uses the system. And so going through this process then allows us to develop those proposed rates that meet the intent and requirements of Proposition 218, where each customer class, their rates are reflective of how they utilize the system and the benefits they receive. So now that we know the first two parts, we can go into the second section, the rate design component. And the first slide here talks a little bit, shows the chart of the annual sewer rates. Now this flips from monthly previously to the annual. This is the rate or the charge that you would see on the property tax rolls. So you can see the increase there for residential, and then the same for commercial. Again, this is where we come into that proportionality to reflect the requirements of Prop 218 based on how each different customer class utilizes the system. So as you go down to the bottom of the slide, you see those bars and restaurants with less than 100 seats, with over 100 seats, they have a higher charge based on how they utilize the system.
And Sean, just to jump in.
Very similar.
Sorry, Sean, to interrupt, but we did have a couple comments in the notices we did receive on hotel charges, and I just want to clarify that that is a per room amount. It's not on the slide, but that was also factored in as part of when we're looking at the hotel component.
Well, can I just ask a question?
Absolutely.
Sean, this is Annie. I have a question real quick. If the sewer rate goes down, I thought from another slide after the third year or so, right? Did I see that it went down?
The overall percentage change goes down, but the bill continues to go up.
So
That's my question. I don't understand that.
So instead of increasing by 7% in year 3, the proposed rate would only go up by 3.5%.
But that's added on too.
It's added on too,
Yeah.
so it is still increasing, just at a slower level.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Thank you. That's simple. Thank you. Now that you said it.
No, that's a good question. I didn't make that very clear on those percentages.
You're being nice.
No, I always try and say those are cumulative adjustments. And you can kind of see that here as you go across the page. You know, you see the little larger increase in 21-22 and 22-23, and then it's the smaller increases as we get out into those out years. Again, smaller percentage on a slightly larger number as well plays into that. On the solid waste rates, very similar rate schedule or customer classes. Our residential, our multifamily, our residential greater than 10 units, shops and offices, grocery, etc. Again, these are based on those trash generation assumptions for each of these different customer classes. And you can see again that reflects how each customer class or rate schedule component utilizes the system. And so as you get down to some of those larger restaurants, you'll see higher numbers based on the amount of trash generation. As part of that, the other subset of solid waste is grease removal. And so from those restaurants, they also have a charge for grease removal to remove that grease from their facilities that they are charged for. And then finally, on the saltwater rates, there's 3 components or rate schedules for customer classes: residential, commercial, and hotel. And again, these are based on those equivalent units. So again, based on a saltwater service, then residential and commercial are that one equivalent unit. And then hotel has that slightly adjusted rate component as part of that to reflect the differences in how they use the saltwater service as part of it. So finally, my last slide here is the recommendations as part of this. Again, as we went through this went through a generally accepted methodology to establish the proportional and cost-based rates, our revenue requirement, our cost of service, and our rate design. We've developed the maximum rates for this next 5-year period, and those are the maximum rates, as Matt mentioned. If you have some changes as you move forward, then you'll be able to incorporate that as you go through your budgeting process each year. But ultimately, the recommendation would be to accept the rate study as developed. And then if there is no majority protest, the City Council may adopt the rates as outlined in the presentation and the rate study report. And then implementation of the rates would be July 1st of each year, starting this upcoming July 1st. They would carry us through this next 5-year window on the property tax rolls. With that, Matt, I can turn it back over to you or the mayor for next steps.
So the folks won't see this on their bill until they get their November tax bill?
Correct.
That's due in December. Okay. All right. Council? Do you have comments, or should I open the public hearing now? Denise, should I just open the public hearing? Sure. Okay, I'd like to open the public hearing for public comment. Mr. Palmer, do you have anything?
Yeah, I have 6 comments on this issue. 7 are in, or 5 are in opposition, 1 no position stated. The first comment that I have comes from Bill Bushing. He writes, I am a single individual living in a 2-bedroom, 2-bath home. As a single individual, I'm tired of subsidizing rates for sewer, solid waste, and saltwater use in this town. I'm charged the same amount as similar units occupied by 2, 4, 6, or more individuals who logically generate far more volume than I do. I create one small kitchen bag of non-recyclable trash every 3 to 4 weeks and one orange bag of recyclable waste over a similar period. As a longtime water conservation practitioner, I only use 200 to 300 gallons of fresh water per month, and I rather doubt I've flushed more times than households with more residents. Thus, my sewage outflow must be lower than residents with far more individuals. In addition, since these fees were added to our property taxes, my annual tax rate has skyrocketed. Currently, it takes me 3 months of my limited Social Security and other income to pay the annual tax burden, and it all comes in 2 payments. Thus, each payment exceeds my monthly income. My property taxes are the single highest expense I have living here. I plead with the council to find a suitable way for costs to be assigned commensurate with use rather than the size of residence. This is patently unfair to single individuals. I don't rent out my extra bedroom due to my ongoing battle with cancer. I need it for visits my family and for the possible need for live-in health care in the future. To repeat, I'm tired of subsidizing rates for similar residences with far more people living in them. The next person, Terry Height, wrote in opposition, Avalon City Council. As the property owner and residents of 331 Eucalyptus Avenue, we write to express our opposition to the proposed significant rate increases to sewer, saltwater, and solid waste / trash. We urge the council to examine other cost reduction efforts, budget reallocations, funding sources, etc., rather than apply a blunt force tax increase. Again, we oppose this effort as currently proposed. Terry and Debbie Height, 331 Eucalyptus Avenue. Timothy Canby writes in opposition. He writes, Timothy Canby, 212 Whitley Avenue, Avalon, California, 90704. To Denise Ratty, City Manager, City of Avalon. I strongly oppose the trash, sewer, and saltwater rate increases proposed by the city. The saltwater system is playing havoc with the residences and city for disastrous effects it has on our piping and extra costs for sewer disposal processing of saltwater. I am experiencing this now at my residence to replace cast iron piping that would otherwise have many more years of life. The rate change rationale did not address this problem in any way, therefore I am opposed. The city needs to switch away from the use of salt water because it's contaminating fresh water that goes into the sewage disposal plant. As a result, it has to be discharged into the ocean, which is also harmful to the environment. Please make up and proceed with plans to make change. There's a number of ways this can be done. Your studies and efforts should be directed in accomplishing this. I vote no on the utility increase proposal now being considered. Best regards, Tim Canby, owner at 212 Whitley Avenue. Laura Vandesand, she writes in opposition, I would like to express my opposition to the property tax increases the city is proposing. These drastic increases will hurt residential homeowners the most, but it'll also trickle down to the vacation rentals and year-round renters. I do not have any solutions to offer, but I feel the council and the staff need to explore other solutions than just taxing the property owners. Thank you. Laura Vandesand, 1 Canyon Terrace, Avalon, California, 90704. Debbie Wright states no position. She writes, why is the city requiring 50% of homeowners to protest in order for this to not go forward, considering the majority of homeowners on the island and on the mainland never received this notice of vote? Debbie Wright, 210 Descanso. Cheryl Phipp, writes in opposition. Conservancy owns most of the island, around 86%. Island Company owns about 12%. There's only 2% private ownership on the island. Do you expect that a small percentage to carry the excessive property tax burden that's being proposed? If reportedly you need 50% of property owners to object to this property increase, surely the Conservancy and Island Company would object. I feel strongly that large increases should not be considered. Please protect your private citizens. Thank you, Cheryl Phipp. And that's all I have so far.
And Oli, did you want to come up and say something? Oh, I'm sorry, was that Paula? Okay, I'm sorry, didn't see that.
Can I just ask one question without it going into...
But come up to the mic, you have to do that, sorry.
Paula Patterson, 221 Whitley. I'm unaware of what Proposition 218 has to do with this outside of the fact that there's mandated procedure. What does 218 address?
Michael, do you? Or who?
I'll let Scott.
Yeah, I'll just say that it's the procedures by which these fees are being adopted. In other words, it's majority protest. So if a majority of homeowners say that they do not want this, then the council cannot consider that. We don't have that now because we didn't have a majority of homeowners or property owners. So now it goes to the council to consider it. It's just Prop 218 is a process and it sets forth the procedures for enacting these measures.
Thank you, Scott. I just didn't know what that was about. So just for credibility, I just want to say my father came here in 1919 for the first time. We bought our home in 1954. I've lived here full-time now for 6 years. And so this island has always been an integral part of my life. I want to also say that despite the color of my hair and the wrinkles I've earned, I am not hearkening for the good old days. I'm not sure there were good old days, because I think the way that we have been stewards of this island and the ocean hasn't been exactly exemplary. And I'm always looking forward to what can we do to make it better, instead of like wishing we could go back, because I'm not sure back was as great as we think it was. So I wanted to just say I really appreciate Councilman McGugan Cassidy's comment about the environmental services, but you know, it is exactly correcting what you say. I watched some city workers doing a large item pickup, a man by himself picking up a stove and a dishwasher. And I said, how is this possible that you are here by yourself doing this? And he says, because they've laid off 7 workers, so I do the large item pickups by myself. Now, in my understanding, you pay this contract, and we pay you to pay that contract, and I am really happy that you're on it to confront them, because I was sitting here before Mr. Baker and Mr. Palmer were part of the city, and I remember Environmental Services saying that they were going to start a green waste program. That has never happened. And I'm wondering, what is the deal? Why are we paying for services? So in my letter that I wrote, I just wanted to say I'm wishing that we would take back a look back at the general plan that was adopted in 2013 that was talking about sustainability.
And you're limited to 2 minutes, so
well, I
wrap
know,
it up.
but I was asking about 2008, about 218. Is that part of my time?
Well, it all is, yes.
Okay. Well, so I'm not going to get through. I just had a question as a citizen to see what 218 was about. That's what I was trying to figure out, because I was reading about it and I didn't know it was a procedural issue.
And we got your letter from...
Right.
Yes.
But I think that what I'm trying to do is put it out, but if you got 118 letters today, I can't imagine that you had time to read all of them. So why don't we ask Environmental Service to initiate a full-fledged residential composting service as promised. They also need to provide us education and regulation regarding the use of these services, particularly waste.
Yeah.
I think we should reevaluate the 22% of the revenue given to the TOT, given to the Love Catalina / Chamber of Commerce.
Okay.
We should increase the wharfage fees of cruise ships.
Okay, these are a lot of budget things as well. So
okay, well, the other thing is, can't we work towards eliminating plastic water bottles in the city?
Yes, we can have an offline discussion about all the recycling and all of that. That's a whole other issue.
Bundling cardboard, but these would all increase the item at the landfill and also help.
I understand. So we can have those, and I'm sure Michael Palmer would love to meet with you with your ideas as well.
We've discussed it. All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I don't mean to be rude, but I get other council members looking at me like, okay, you're giving them 2 minutes, now you're giving them 4, and so I'm trying to keep it down. Yeah, it does. Okay. Ole Olson.
Thank you. Ole Olson, 362 Marilla, the treasurer. I want to reduce this to its simplest form. We have 3 businesses in town that we operate, or that operate by us: trash, sewer, and saltwater. If they don't make money, we have to subsidize it. We don't have any money to subsidize it out of the general fund. So if you want to start cutting services, don't vote for the increase. But I encourage you to vote for the increase, which is just recovering our cost of service. That's all there is.
All right.
Thank you.
No, thank you very much.
Okay, but specifically, I disagree with the cost of service. And that's what a lot of the opposition is, especially with the solid waste.
Meaning that if they were, keep talking, Cindy, say it.
Well, if we're paying for services we're not receiving, then I have an issue with the cost of service. And if it's costing, I guess I want to look more at the actual costs of the services, specifically with solid waste.
How do we look at it more
Mayor,
thoroughly?
can we just continue with the public hearing first, then bring it back to the council?
I'm sorry, yes, okay.
Thank you.
I do have one more comment that came in. Debbie Wright writes in opposition, as a building owner and citizen, I'm sorry, Deborah Avalona.
Okay.
As a building owner and citizen, I respectfully object to the proposed fees raises over years to 2025. This raise is ultimately and disproportionate to the immediate post-recovery to the impacts of the COVID incident. The recent openings, while welcome, are yet uncertain in perpetuity. COVID is not yet eradicated. Most citizens have incurred additional debt over the last year's event. Current fuel and construction supply prices have soared by 300% plus, as most things pre-COVID. This raise is not contributory to the fiscal recovery of the citizens of Avalon. Kindly allow the passing of recovery time before implementing a 5-year plan, as to the next year, much less 5 years, are both unpredictable and uncertain. Kindly implement the 1 year 3 to 5% raise and revisit this issue after the completion of this year. Only then will the state of recovery be evident. A raise of this proportion at this time is at best premature. Thank you. Deborah Avalona, property owner, 327 Metropole.
Is there anybody else in the audience who would like to make a comment? I see you, Mr. Council, on the back. Did you have anything you wanted to add?
No, I'm observing.
Okay, okay. Alrighty, so I will close the public.
No.
Oh,
come on up.
Oh, what? Why is she still sitting there? Sure.
Is this going to be...
Wait, please step all the way to the mic, sweetheart.
Thank you. Is this going to be assessed on our property tax?
That's where it will appear.
Well, how would that bind with Proposition 13? They weren't supposed to put any more property tax on there unless it was voted in.
Okay, our finance director can explain that very well.
Pardon?
So we utilize the property tax bill to facilitate the billing.
They're not supposed to add any more on Proposition 13.
It's not a tax, it's a charge for a service. So you're right, there are restrictions for new taxes.
Right.
And that's why I tried to clarify in the beginning, this isn't a tax, but it's a charge for a service. So the monies you pay for trash pickup.
But if they put it on your property tax, that is property tax.
No.
We utilize the property tax billing system because it's cheaper than having city staff do it, but it's not a tax, it is a service charge.
I'm going to call downtown.
You can call them.
And find out.
All right.
Because that's what they assured us, that we weren't supposed to get anything on our property tax. And it'll be on my property tax bill, right?
It'll be on the county's bill, yes.
Yeah, that's what I say. How could they do that?
It will be on their form. It will be on their form, but that is all. So instead of us sending out a 55-cent stamp with all of these bills to you, they put it on that just for us. So it has nothing to do with your property tax. It has to do with the user fees.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
If I could just so we know, it's Health and Safety Code 5473 specifically provides that if the council passes this fee and it's a 2/3 vote, which is in your case 4 votes to pass this, that the fees can be collected by the county through the use of putting them on the tax roll, but they are fees, not taxes.
That's right.
So again, there's a specific statute that allows that. And the use of this statute through doing it by mail, that's what triggers the requirement that this be passed by four votes. So it needs four votes to pass this.
Okay.
If it only passes by 3, then you have to physically mail the bills.
I just want to make a comment in that I had this discussion with family members this weekend as why are we raising their property taxes? And it's just that it's on your property tax bill. It's not raising your property taxes.
Right, paying for service. So, if there are no other comments from the public, we'll close the public hearing. One of the things I thought was interesting, and Sean, you're still here, is Bill Bushing's comment. You know, he's a family of 1. There are families of 6 and 7 and 8. And has there ever been a way to figure that out so that it seems a little more equitable?
Yeah, that was a very good comment. And one of the challenges with I'll call it a flat rate like we have here for sewer, is that it's very hard to split that up into different equivalent units, right? Depending on how many people live there. The administrative side of that would be, city staff or somebody would have to figure out how many people are in each house to go through that process. So where people do have, or where utilities do have a fee sewer rate that is more in line with number of occupants, really goes down to flow or wastewater generation based on metered water consumption, which is not a data point that we necessarily have for you all. And so that makes it a little more challenging to try and split that up. So we've used as much information as we could gather on your customers on wastewater flow to develop this, but that is a challenge to this type of rate structure. It's something that you could think about as you move forward to see if there is a way, but we'd have to have, with Proposition 218, we'd have to have some method or data to be able to support why it's less or more for a larger or smaller household.
And you don't think anybody has done that? A flow or generation calculation?
People have, but not necessarily for your customers. That's the key, is we need to have this based on the city's data and information.
Huh, okay.
And Bob could correct me, but we currently don't meter individual sewer from...
Usually a municipality could use, especially if you had both utilities for water and for sewer, you could be metering your water in, and we just don't meter our salt water in, but if you could have those readings, what goes in comes out for the most part, unless you're using it for landscaping, which you could take some factor. Yeah. But that would be, if we had that, we don't have that, so it's not a perfect system.
And those homes that, those condos or whatever that just have freshwater toilets, so they don't get any kind of a saltwater bill? Because they're not hooked up at all, or they...
That's correct. So there are not a lot, but there are some properties that aren't assessed any saltwater fees.
Yeah.
And that's because they're on record with the city of not being connected to the system.
Okay. Okay. Council, do you have any more questions or...
Mayor, we should just clarify also that they're not connected to the system, not of their choice. It's they can't access the salt water, so
right,
because it is not an option if you have access to the salt water.
Right. Yes. Okay. So all the letters, that, except for the couple that didn't make any comments, other than stated a fact. I mean, there's not anybody sitting here or in this room or in this community that wants to see this happen. And for some, I put out the challenge, God, if you can come up with something, God, we would love to hear it. I believe that the staff gave an incredible presentation on what our needs are, what the community's needs are, and to serve you all. And I am so sorry that it comes with this price tag. I am happy to see that over time they go down. That's delightful. But we have to improve our existing infrastructure, and we have to create reserves. So I don't know what Cindy wants to do when she's talking about the problems with the sewer rates. We can have further discussion on that, but anyway, Council.
I think the biggest rationale that I'm trying to take away from this was looking at, and Matt mentioned the first year increases. I looked at it as the whole 5-year portion to kind of say, okay, what's the bottom line of in the end of these 5 years?
So sorry.
Don't they know your schedule? Come on. In the end of these 5 years, what would that increase in a bill look like? And the increase of the salt water is $3 a month. That is not horribly significant. It's a few cents a day. The increase in the sewer is $20 a month. A little more expensive, but you're not even up to $1 a day in terms of increase, and being able to afford that seems fairly rational. The increase for solid waste is the one, of course, that is the most challenging in a number of ways because of the significance of what's going to happen. The part that I'm concerned about is if we're undercutting ourselves now, you're only going to have to pay for that later. And that seems to be often the choice that's made for the sake of keeping people happy now, and then we end up in a boat where that happens. And oftentimes it's because of things out of our control. The cost of inflation, the cost of projects that increase over time, the cost of additional fees for things like insurance and employment and all the things that go with operating a business. So my hesitation in wanting to try to see if we can lower these is that we're not going to get out of this boat. We'll stay in the boat. We'll have the same issues in the boat, but they'll only be magnified later. I agree with the comments that were made about trying to see if there's ways that we can lower pricing over time. I think the thing to keep in mind is these are the maximum rates they could be. They could absolutely be less than this if we can figure out ways to bring costs back into it, to elongate the length of the landfill age. I'm not against seeing if there's a study that makes sense to try to do management by use as opposed to this, but I think that a system like that we could look at would end up being fairly costly to implement. To add meters to every household seems like it would be an extremely expensive endeavor, and potentially for not much savings for most homeowners, unfortunately, is my concern. I don't know if there is the possibility of having some sort of waiver or template program we could come up with that would assist people who are individuals and may use less than what they are actually being charged for, and look at how we could offset that through reserves eventually. I don't think we're there yet, but I think that that may be something we can look at as a program down the road. But I don't know. A part of me, but I would like to keep the rates at 3.5% and 2.5% for those third, fourth, and fifth years, knows that there are also likely other things down the road that we're not looking at right now, and we'll end up in a similar boat where we have to do a massive increase again. I don't know if it's better, though, for homeowners to have something more steady over time as opposed to these jumps and then leveling. Yeah. If it makes sense to have a certain percentage planned for every year so that you're not seeing a huge jump and then a level off, and then a huge jump and a level off. It seems to be repetitive. So I don't know how we manage that while trying to make it match what it is that the actual fund requires as opposed to what we may think we need. But the actual cost, I think, would be more palatable for people if they thought of it in a per month payment, because it comes at one time of the year and feels like, even though it's not, feels like part of their taxes. I feel like they feel like it's such a huge hit, and it's actually covering services for the span of a full year. Right. So I had asked the question, does it make sense to switch back to having that monthly billing service, and that way it doesn't feel like it's such a huge hit, you're paying it monthly, The hard part with that is then you're incurring more cost. So those prices are going to go up because it's more staff time. It doesn't fix the problem. It causes more of an issue. So I don't know. At this point, in line with Cindy's comments about wanting to look at what the fund back into the reserve, if any, or the fund back into the ratepayers, if any, because of services not received during the pandemic. I do think that needs to be addressed, please, by city staff. But otherwise, the fees make sense to me. They are required for us to continue providing a level of service that we need to require, that we need to be able to provide.
And I agree with Lisa on what she has said. Let's not forget that we just went through a pandemic that devastated our economy and the city's ability of revenue, to the point of we've had to pull from reserves. Should this happen again in the next couple of years, where will we be if we don't have money coming in to keep these functions going? Saltwater, trash, these are all things that we need to be taking care of. And so, yes, it looks really hard, but when you're getting that bill at one time, that is really difficult. But we've got to maintain our systems, because and putting things into reserve for that rainy day, especially should this last year of hell happen again, we've got to be prepared. So, and I have to agree with Cindy in that the service that we're getting and that we're paying for, we had better well be getting them, or compensation should be given back to us.
Yesenia, did you have any comments you'd like to make?
This is tough. It's really tough. I know we were probably all very nervous for this meeting. But you all made really good points. This was going to happen either today or it will happen within the next couple years. So it's not something that we can put off. Of course, I don't want to raise anything. We're all struggling, especially with this pandemic. And there's no way to make this sound any better, but we need the services. The only thing that makes me feel a little bit at ease is what Matt mentioned, that we'd be able, if everything goes as planned, we'd be able to lessen the rates, correct? There's room to work with that. So I'd like to see more ideas, if we can, make this, bring it back to discuss more. And I definitely would like to bring CR and R in to make sure they're being held accountable with everything they say they will give us.
I don't know if there's a question in there, but just to clarify, it is a maximum rate we're setting. So if we were to be able to renegotiate a contract and future savings were to materialize, we could then factor that into the rate, either going forward or even potentially as a rebate. So that again, we're setting the maximum rate, but as we pursue other avenues for savings, we can then factor those savings into the rates.
And Oli, I'm sorry, but did you make a comment about we can't just be collecting money for money's sake? And
yeah, I feel so clean now. Thank you. Yeah, we can't collect money through service charges for services that we don't provide. If these things make money, either we have to reduce the rates or we have to rebate the money back. So we can't charge willy-nilly. We can't charge sewer fees that go into the general fund. We can't charge, it stands as a standalone business. It's just, we operate it.
All right. Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
If I could just, on some procedural matters, again, the fee study looks at what the actual cost of providing the services are. It's based on the contracted amount that we have and our own internal cost, and looking at what we're going to need to do. So that's what that's what sets the rates. Each year then, after the rates, if you would adopt these rates, this comes back to you to place them on the tax rolls, okay? And at that time, when you decide, yes, we're gonna have these fees collected by the county, you set what the fees are each year when that comes to you. So again, what you're doing here is you're setting the rates, but then each year when this item comes back to you for consideration, there will be a recommendation from Matt as to, yes, these were the rates and we negotiated a little bit, they can be less, or gosh, the costs are what we thought they would be and we're recommending the whole amount. What I would suggest is, given the council's concern, that if you vote on these, that there could be a separate motion to direct staff to work with CR&R and to come back with a report on the cost of services and any potential rebate actions or other actions, given the loss of service or the apparent loss of service during the COVID time, and why we should not get some consideration back. So that could be a separate motion coming out of this. It's for just, again, for staff to come back and give you a report.
So we can visit this every year, right?
Yes, every year yes, because you have to take an action every year to place these on the tax rolls. Okay. And so every year for the next 5 years, you will be given the opportunity to look at these fees and say, okay, do we want to charge them or do we want to go a little bit less? And frankly, I have had it happen in Lake Arrowhead where 2 out of 3 years, the council decided to reduce the fees because the actual cost came in a little bit less than they set. And so that is totally within your power to do so.
Well, that's kind of nice news. And Sean shaking his head that we could do it that. Okay. So Cindy, did you?
Annie, yeah, I would like to respectfully request that we take these items as individual votes, if we could. And I don't know if that means I need to make a motion or.
For Sean, if I could.
Go ahead.
Sean, I did notice in your presentation, it said that one of the factors is making sure that you guys have an adequate cash reserves. Say, for example, you guys end up doing very well. Is that something next year that maybe would help us reduce the charges?
Yeah, absolutely. When we look at that, we set a minimum based on typical industry standards, and then also what is a reasonable reserve for you as a city for each of these enterprise funds. And that's what happened in the last study. Like on the sewer side, we were actually using reserves fairly significantly over the last several years, which allowed those rates to be lower. Now, we had some changes since that last study, but that's ultimately the goal when we look at that.
And so then in the study, just to let council know, we set a 90-day operating reserve target for those funds, which is, like I said before, you kind of have to look at every city and every fund uniquely, but that we felt was an appropriate level for those funds.
Okay.
So to get to Councilwoman Cassidy's point, the resolution is one resolution to establish all the fees, and then there's a separate resolution for each one of the fees, which is, again, it would reconfirm that fee and then set it on the rolls. So you could vote on the resolution before you, which sets all the fees, and then if there was a fee that you objected to, specifically, I think, the solid waste fees, when that resolution comes up for the placement of those fees on the rolls for this year, you could vote no on that.
So we're making 4 different votes then?
Well, I think there's one resolution that establishes what the rates are, okay? There's one resolution to do that.
Yeah.
Then there are, I think there are 4 1, 2, 4 resolutions to again reestablish those fees and place them on the tax rolls. So there's 5 resolutions before you.
So Cindy, the additional 4 are one's for sewer, one's for salt water, one's for trash, and one's for the grease.
Okay. So, Cindy, I have a question. If your opposition, and maybe somebody else's opposition to the solid waste is because you feel their service was poor, is there a certain time we have to approve this to get it on the tax roll? I mean, yes.
The service poor was not necessarily the only issue. The 47% increase is the issue to me. The fact that I don't agree with the cost of the services, and maybe the service can be, maybe the service that we received, we could look at that differently on what we received, or maybe we could look at doing a different cost of service for those that, like Mr. Bushing's comment, for example. You know, maybe we could look at recovering the services differently that's more equitable for those in our community. Perhaps and this is off the cuff, so I don't want to get, yelled at later, but maybe a vacation rental has a higher rate than a non-vacation rental. I don't know, but I understand that it's a cost recovery. I am just disagreeing with the cost. And that's not just from the cost of the service we didn't receive under the pandemic. That's an ongoing cost. So I'm going to stand with the members of the community who do not want to see that fee increased, but I would be willing to to vote yes for the sewer and the saltwater fees, because as Councilmember Lavelle alluded to, when you break those out, it's not nearly as significant. So if we're unable to recover these solid waste costs, something's wrong. We need to look at that service better.
Okay, but the solid waste includes the landfill. Where else can we get the money for the landfill? That's a huge ticket item. It's not just picking up the garbage. And
I get it.
But how do we come up?
We just keep increasing fees every time we turn around. All we do, increase taxes, increase fees.
I know.
And I'm sorry, I've said my piece on it. I'm not in favor of it, and I'm going to stand with the rest of the residents on that.
I just don't know. It's wonderful to say, and I'd like to say, we'd all like to say we don't really like any of these. However, how long would it take and how much would it cost staff to work on ways to collect money some other way to meet those? Because the landfill is an issue, all those other things. So I just don't know if it doesn't pass today, then there's no money in that fund, and then what do we do? So, I mean, just to even compromise to put some money in there. I mean, I don't know. You're going to vote no on it, but it takes 4/5. So I'm really concerned that that's not going to happen at all, and that is our biggest ticket item and our biggest expense, and the one that has the most need. So I'm very concerned and trash, and we generate a hell of a lot of trash. So I don't know. So I guess I'm looking if that's okay if you want to stick to your guns, but if there's no solution, I don't know what the answer is.
If I could, I just got off the phone with our tax person, and we're going to be drafting another resolution. If the council's direction is we could have another resolution to just go with the sewer and salt water, and then a separate resolution for the solid waste fees, so that we'll split the one resolution that now creates all three to do it for one resolution for sewer saltwater and another resolution for solid waste fees. He's drafting that resolution right now, if that's the count, if you want to consider that.
Okay, let me ask one more question. You said that this has to be passed, whatever happens, by a certain time to be on the tax roll. What is that deadline?
We have to notify the LA County Assessor's Office by August 14th? August 10th?
I believe the date's August 10th.
Yes, it's August 10th.
Okay. So I'm not sure what we do with that, because if we're going to direct staff to look at other options and whatever, can they even get anything seriously done and brought to us so we could come up with some other different rate?
So the other way that this affects us, Mayor, is if you don't adopt it now and you hold it off, it's going to be extremely difficult for Matt to figure out our budget, because we won't know how much we're going to be draining from our general fund then.
Right.
And Scott,
I would also say that because this is governed by the procedure established by 218, that if you reconsidered the fee basis, you'd have to do a new fee report, and there's certain procedural requirements with that. And I don't know if Sean can redo come up with the alternatives, do another fee study in time to get it on the rolls this year.
And then, Scott, correct me if I'm wrong, but there'd also be reset of the noticing requirements.
Correct.
So I don't think there would, not saying that changes anything, but I don't think that would be in time for the August 10th deadline.
Scott, can you answer this? If council wishes to not include, let's say, the permitting costs as part of the solid waste, could they adopt the fee with a reduction if there was an element of that study that they did not want? Because part of what's driving up the cost, one is the cost of the trust for the landfill that was not accounted for in that, but also the strategies in order to, one, implement SB 1383, and two, to increase the life of the landfill. So if the life of the landfill, which is about $400,000, was not taken into account and the new fee was calculated, could council consider a reduction in that fee?
Yes, council could always consider that what the procedure before the council today is. This is the notice for the maximum fees you can charge. You could lower it. There are certain fees in the landfill that are the fact that the state has now mandated that we restructure how we do our trash collection. That is a large part of what the fee is based on, is that the state mandate that we have to separate things even more than we do now.
And I think the important point in that is that this is just what the maximum fee would be. I mean, we have the ability of lowering those, but this is just setting the maximum.
No, good clarification.
Is there room for any other comments?
Sure. I don't know, maybe the other council may say no, but I say yes.
Thank you. John Council, 352 Catalina Avenue. It seems that a lot of this burden is being placed on residents for the solid waste in particular, and I would submit that, a good size of solid waste materials that are generated annually are from visitation. And why is not some of that burden applied to that group of people? Why is it all pretty much loaded on the residents here, and we're not seeming to take into account that a lot of the solid waste generation is caused by visitation, and we're the ones being impacted by it. So why are we not doing something to create a fee or some revenue based on that section of the population?
Well, that's interesting. One of the things is, people say, well, you can add another buck or whatever because we have 1 million visitors, add another buck to the ticket. But you do that and all that money goes into the harbor. You can't put it into those funds. Mm-hmm. So, and you can, for the hotels and the vacation rentals and all of those visitors that stay in there will be paying because they're just going to tack it onto the price of a room.
Yeah, well, I think that, across the board,
I don't know how you do that.
If we apply these fees, to residents, most of the business owners are residents here, and they'll end up just, increasing their rates for whatever businesses that they have in order to cover those costs. So fees across the board for visitation of the island are going to go up, so that's something to be considered as well. Nobody's just going to take it in the shorts and say, oh, okay, I'm just going to pay higher rates and I'm not going to look to try to make up that revenue someplace else in my business. Everybody's going to do that. So our costs of coming here is going to increase. We just have to.
Yeah, so that is good. And if you can come up with an idea on how we can charge everybody across the board, if you don't think staff hasn't been working on that, I know but if you can come up with something, because we haven't been able to.
Understood.
So I appreciate your comments, but.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
I would note that when you look at the fee schedule, I'm just looking at, for instance, solid waste schedule. And I'm going to do the current, the current year. $1 million are from residents, and everything else, it looks like it's maybe $14 million is from businesses that serve customers and visitors. So there is built into the fee schedule that Sean did, the capture of those costs from people utilizing the shops, the groceries. The restaurants are the biggest hit. That's over half of the fees are for restaurants.
And again, no system is perfect, but there was an effort made using industry standards to look at how much waste a residential homeowner creates, compare to that to how much a hotel guest creates, compare that to how much a restaurant creates. Right. And as part of the cost of service study, we did try to proportion out those costs so that the costs aren't just being placed on one group or the other, but it's based on our estimated waste production in that case.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Okay, if there's Chuck Adargo, come on up real quick.
While he's coming up, Sean, can I just ask you a question as well? Because I'm assuming that you're doing this type of study for a number of different entities. If you could maybe speak after this gentleman speaks to if you think costs that we're seeing are in line with other communities in terms of services offered.
Okay, Chuck.
Chuck Adargo, 244 Descanso. I've been listening to everything that everybody's had to say and comments and about ideas and, what are we going to do about this problem? And our current sales tax rate on Catalina is 10%. If you upped it to 11, I don't think anybody's going to die from that. Okay? And could we utilize that extra penny to pay for this? With the amount of people that come over here and visit, like Mr. Council was alluding to, that's a lot of money. People come over here and spend money on whatever they want to get, from postcards to towels to suntan lotion, doesn't matter what it is.
Right.
If we all shared in that, city members, city people that live here, plus, visitors.
Right.
Our only revenue comes from hospitality.
Right.
That's it.
Yeah.
Okay, and people come here, and most of them, I'm not going to say they don't care what they're going to pay, but they're here for a good time to enjoy themselves.
Right. Well, I don't want to interrupt, but the most that we can raise, if it's voted on by the people, is 1/4 cent.
That's it?
Yes. Correct, city manager?
Well, and we tried.
That's still something. Is there any way that we could take that even 1/4%? Okay.
There is a ballot measure that will be on the ballot at the next general election.
Yeah, it will be on the ballot.
Actually, for that.
Yeah.
Okay, but because even at 1/4%, if we have a summer like I think we're going to have, and this COVID thing kind of subsides because it looks like it's going to.
Right.
At least I hope it does.
Yeah. Thank you, Chuck.
That could be one way of getting around it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Okay. So no more public comment. And council, what's your pleasure?
Just a
you
question.
had a question.
Yeah. So that was a really good question. Each utility is unique in the sense of what the total costs are, and solid waste is even more unique than water or sewer, just from the sense that it's generally a contracted service. More and more folks have gone to similar to what you have, where it's a service that you acquire as part of the collection and disposal of trash. I will say that in general, yes, these costs seem to be in line with what I'm seeing in other places. And I'm also seeing large increases to solid waste rates because of AB 1383. Because all of a sudden it is this new service. As Matt mentioned at the beginning, different folks that I'm working with right now are going to a third can. For whatever reason, it's a different type or size of can. Again, that's getting a little bit out of my area of expertise, but it's a different truck. And so now you have an additional capital cost, an additional, staffing level that we're seeing all over drive up with the organics piece that's impacting utility rates, similar to what we saw a couple years ago with the recycling side, when we saw the hit in recycling, we saw some of that impact. We're seeing that again now on the organic side.
Okay. Thank you. I think I just wanted to ask that question because I don't disagree with Cindy on the idea of looking at that cost and what the cost is, but I also don't know, similar to what Mayor Marshall pointed out, I don't know that we're going to see a significant amount of savings by either changing the contractor, changing the contract, changing the level of service less than what we have now, which is what's required, and what we're trying to meet is what will be required. I'm a little concerned that we may do a large amount of work on it only to find us back where we are right now. So.
Okay, well, there's no further comment. I think Scott said that we could take each of them separately, resolutions separately.
Yeah, and actually, well, give me direction. I just emailed resolutions to Denise, Michael, and Matt that would separate the, it'd be two motions, one for saltwater and sewer fees, and the other for solid waste. So you could do it that way, or you could do it all in one resolution. But you still have to do the 4 separate resolutions for collecting them on the tax rolls. But it's council's pleasure. If you want to do the establishment of the fees in one resolution or two, you have that option.
Well, could we even, well, okay, never mind. Let's do it.
Is there consensus to do the fees, service fees, as 2 separate resolutions first? I guess that would, okay.
Well,
so
I would rather not, because I'd like to think it's going to be 5, but it doesn't sound like it is. Well, let's try it, because if we get 4/5, it's done, right? And if we don't, okay. So let's, for now, do them as one and see where that goes.
Okay, the title of that resolution is the resolution of the City Council of the City of Avalon establishing rates for sewer, saltwater, and solid waste service fees.
I'll second that.
No, I didn't make the motion. I was just reading what the title of the resolution would be.
Am I tired already? It's only 7 or something. Okay, go ahead. Is anybody going to? I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Okay, so the moved and seconded. Further comments before the vote?
Michael, do you have anything?
If we can
I
just,
have no
Denise,
comments.
for the record, there are not sufficient, there's not a majority of votes that have been received via mail or in public comment to vote no on this from the public, correct?
That is correct.
Just wanted that in the record.
The official of the formal written protest was 107.
Okay. Okay, there's a motion and a second. Denise, call for the vote.
Councilmember De La Rosa.
Aye.
Councilmember Lavelle.
Aye.
Councilmember Ponce.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Cassidy.
Aye.
Nope.
No.
Oh, good, here we go.
Cindy, I'm going to say Mayor Pro Tem Cassidy.
No.
And Mayor Marshall.
Aye.
So 4 ayes and 1 no. Mayor Pro Tem Cassidy.
Okay. All righty. Now we get to move on to...
No, so now we need, we have the 4 separate resolutions, and that's for placing them on the tax rolls.
Okay, you two do this.
Do we need to do those as 3 separate, or can they go as
There's
one altogether?
4 of them, and Scott, can they combine all 4 together?
Yes,
Placing
you
them on
can
the
make
tax
one
roll?
motion for the adoption of the 4 resolutions.
So moved.
I'll second.
Call for the vote?
Councilmember De La Rosa?
Aye.
Councilmember Lavelle?
Aye.
Councilmember Ponce?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Cassidy?
No.
And Mayor Marshall?
Yes.
4 ayes and 1 no. Mayor Pro Tem Cindy Cassidy.
Okay.
You want to have any direction on the CR&R issue?
Right.
Cindy, did you want to make?
Well, yeah, I thought I gave that a year ago. So, yeah, I'd like to have, I'd like to make sure that we look at the services not received last year, and I'll offline work directly with city staff on trying to, maybe look at some different, look at the contract differently, or look at the services a little differently. But I don't think we need to do that tonight.
Okay, great.
Is there a way to get the new manager to come speak as well?
I'm sorry, what's that?
Is there a way to get the new manager to speak? We haven't met him, right?
We could certainly ask him to join us.
He's going to be tickled to come now.
Would it be possible, Denise, also to get a fresh copy of the contract emailed to each of us just for review?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay. All righty, so miscellaneous fee schedules. So, there you go, Matt.
Not a whole lot to speak on there. The majority of the fees we recommended increasing by CPI, using the last fiscal year as kind of the base measure. So most of the fees went up by 2.48%, rounded to the nearest dollar. There are a few exceptions, and one of them being with the cemetery fees with the bronze vases. We found that the cost, has been mentioned a few times, is going up considerably for those. So rather than have a set dollar amount, and I believe it was $168 or so in prior fee schedules, we're changing that to an at-cost basis. No markup, but just whatever the actual cost of that is. I believe that was it, unless there was maybe one other. I don't have the.
Okay. Well, shall we open the public hearing first? Public hearing is now open. Any comments?
I have no comments.
And all of these fees were posted, correct, Denise?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Close the public hearing. Well, I have some, I made some little check marks here and there. And it's a darn shame that we're talking about these fees right after we just did these. So nothing's going to sound very favorable. However, one of the things that I had kind of asked for was with code enforcement, with what the cost of their service is from, their payroll, their benefits, the vehicles they drive, the blah, 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 everything they have. What is that number? And then what is the percentage of time spent on things? For example, an auto-wet permit or a residential vehicle. To me, it's a privilege to be able to have a vehicle in this town. And if we would have known what if that dollar amount was, $200,000, I'd like to see how this money goes out, to see, what do we bring in for vehicle permits, so that we know that we're actually paying for the service without paying for a cost of service study.
Mayor, I know that you've requested this, and Matt did note in his staff report that we do plan to assess those vehicle permit fees to incorporate all your concerns, and that will come back to you.
Okay, so do we then take some of these out of there, or because we're not going to prove each one, so Do we just take those that we're concerned about out to be looked at?
I think it's staff's recommendation that we would adopt the fee schedule as presented, and we can always come back at a separate meeting to modify the fee schedule. So if we did want to look at the vehicle permitting process, and it is on my list to do, I have not forgotten. I do apologize. A whole year has gone by. But it's staff's recommendation that we would adopt the fee schedule as presented. I believe the other fee relates to the change from a conditional use permit to a licensing structure. And so Mike and I are working on developing that fee. We just didn't have it to a point where we were ready to present it to council for this meeting. And so we will be coming back at a later meeting for that fee specifically as well.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, false alarms. We have, for the first one, there's nothing, the second one, there's 41, and the third one, there's 164. And this has been a little something with me. Nothing that our guys run on is a false alarm. Because if we're not going to ticket them, or if we're not going to do something with it, just take it out. Because the fire chief said, well, no, but you know, if it was something, well, at least we're there and all of that, and it's good that they're that sensitive, but I guess maybe, I don't know what a false alarm is, but if you go on a run and there's nothing happened other than the alarm went off, to me, that's false. And so,
again, I don't see Mike here in the audience, but I have discussed this with him, and my understanding is if an alarm went off because there was a heat or smoke that triggered the alarm, you know, even if it wasn't to the level that would require a response, it's not a true false alarm. I think the intent more was either someone pulling it as not a prank, but in an inappropriate way, or if it was a known faulty and it wasn't being addressed. But most of the calls where they go on, the alarm was triggered correctly, so it wouldn't be in their definition of false alarm.
okay. And go try to find some kid who pulls a false alarm. Yeah, okay. Thank you, you're batting 100 or 1,000. Okay, the other thing is also included in this whole thing is like, so you have like animal control versus animal roundup. I don't know what the difference is in controlling them and rounding them.
That's a good question. I'll have to follow up with code on that one.
And I'm really curious, how much money has come in under that for the dogs that they have rounded up?
Nominal, I'd say safely under 1,000.
So we are getting some money from some of those things we're rounding up, and well, that's good to know. Okay, so that's okay. It's not a big deal as long as they're paying for the difference between controlling and rounding. That's fine. And I'll just finish going through my list, and then you can. I love the landscape permit fees. 30,001 square feet to 1 acre. I guess we have to just plan on something could happen one of these days. What is this? Investigation fees for work without permits, R3 occupancies. What is that?
I believe Mike Palmer in planning could assist with that. I think there are fines associated if you start construction on a project without going through the appropriate permitting and planning process. I believe that's what those are referring to.
And I missed I was trying to find it on here. What were you referring to?
The investigation fee for work without permit, R3 occupancies and all other, what's an R3, I guess is my first question. Units with over 3 residents?
Mayor, what page are you on so Michael can find it easier?
Page 12, I'm sorry, page 12 down at the bottom.
I don't have a good answer for you for what R3 occupancy is. My guess is that's a reference to the code, but the other, on the fine, it would be mostly starting work prior to obtaining the permit. So there's an investigation that we can recover costs for sending John out there, one, to investigate claims, and two, to make cure.
Okay. And then I'd like to go to, what page was the harbor fees?
That's near the front.
Yeah, there at harbor. Okay. So this isn't going to be, this not going to be looked on very favorably. However, I do need to bring it up. Our biggest draw on our budget is the harbor department. And in trying to figure out how to generate more income, it seems like one of the ways, I'm just going to throw it out there, would be in the summer months when we're busy from whatever, we increase the rates. Now, I know we can't, I don't think we can have a residential rate for those, but if I've got a 90-foot boat and I pay $76 and I've got 5, 6, 7 people in that boat, that's a pretty inexpensive hotel room for that many people. And, you know, we give them free trash. We deal with their trash. And so when Orrin, when you said in those many days you generated $1,407 nights, right? So if that was even increased $15 or $20 per night based on some size of the boats or even more, that could generate some decent amount of money for your harbor.
Yeah, there's a number of different ways that we could look at all of that. But I mean, first I want to clarify harbor fund versus harbor department. The harbor fund, which has an incredible amount of infrastructure involved. So, you know, all the floats and docks and everything associated with the whole harbor is maintained by the harbor fund and the harbor department. And then, of course, Matt can explain better, but then certain services are charged to the harbor fund. So the harbor department itself is, you know, a useful, efficient tool that the city has designed over time and allows for the charging of the mooring fees and the maintenance of the moorings. And, you know, realistically, having for an owner to own a mooring in Avalon Harbor, I mean, you can really compare it to having an apartment in New York City. I mean, you're a 70-foot mooring, you know, $2 million. I mean, we're talking some real numbers here. So I think, you know, we could certainly explore all of the comments you made. The trash pickup, I mean, that is something that I have known to be part of the mooring fee. But if you wanted to look at it as a separate charge, we could certainly look at that. There might be other avenues, but I think that would be better to take offline. Right now, you know, we come back with what's already been established and proven over the years. So the way you guys collect the wharfage fees from both the cruise ships and the other visitors, you know, all of that plays into everybody coming ashore and visiting and enjoying the town. I'm sorry, I hope I'm answering your question.
No, and I appreciate that. And you know, if I could say, let's not look at that, but I really think we need to look at that when you've got an 80-foot boat and we increase the rate by $1 a night.
Right.
That's ludicrous to me. I mean, we're doing that to rec fees when they're paying $17 to play t-ball and now it's 18. So, I mean, based on their percentage or whatever. So to me, it just seems...
I think it's correct to definitely look at like the cost price index and then justifiably try to keep up with inflation or how things are changing. But I have to tell you, when you get to the smaller boats, I've had people come up and just let me have it because of what they're paying for a mooring fee. They're retirees, they're on fixed incomes, and all they want to do is enjoy their retirement. And they won't come here when it's a daily rate. They'll wait till the shoulder rate, or they'll wait till the winter rate.
Right.
And they're, so we see all of that. I guess we see all sides, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I guess, yes, if I've got a 30-foot boat, $21, that still seems ridiculous. But when I've got a 100-foot boat and I'm paying $86.
And part of the rationale, I think in the last year we increased the mooring rates by 5% and the other fees by 10%. So part of I think the rationale behind the rates was kind of in recognition that we have increased rates, I think in at least 2 of the 3 years that I've been in this position, by more than CPI. So it's also partially trying to strike a balance between setting a rate at a level we can support, but 2, also a market rate that we won't drive away potential customers by increasing the rates beyond what they're willing to pay. We could certainly go higher. We'd have to go back and kind of restart the process, is my understanding, as far as noticing goes. But part of my rationale for not increasing it by more than CPI was more in recognition that we had, in I believe 2 of the past 3 years, increased it by more than CPI to try to recoup some of those revenues. And so that was my rationale.
Yeah, I totally understand it. But it's not cutting the mustard, and that's okay. The hotels now can say, okay, but I'm going to have to increase my hotel room by so much because you're just doing my sewer, salt water, and trash by $5 or $10 a night, or whatever. So, I think the hits need to go somewhat across the board, because they generate trash that gets put in our landfill, and our harbor department, and
the harbor does contribute to the sewer and saltwater and solid waste funds as well.
They do. Good. So good. So let them get some money so they can help do that a little easier. So I don't know if anybody else wants to look at those rates at all. And I don't even say it under a 30-foot, 21-foot boat, but when you're talking some of these bigger vessels. We've got a lot of yacht club members and tuna club members that own their moorings, so they're not paying for it, right? But when their mooring is rented out, that's where the money comes in, right, Oren? So I don't think for $10 or $15 or $20 these people are going to stay away. So I don't know. Can we look at it, kids, or no? Or you don't want to touch those?
If there's direction, I'm happy to bring back those fees again at a later meeting.
Well, you hear people say, like John Council, let's get some of these other people that are coming over and spending money. And so we look, so it's not just the locals that are paying for it. So this is one alternative to bring in a couple more bucks somehow. But is there any, if I'm the only one singing, then we won't touch it. But I'd be curious why you wouldn't want to touch it when you're going to have to put your room rates up.
The only hesitation I have is that we did raise them last year. We were part of that discussion right after we came onto council, and so I don't know if it makes sense to raise them right away right now. I don't disagree with you that, looking at the cost of the enterprise funds that we just discussed may need to be shared with the harbor. But I think we need to bring that back at a later date to be able to discuss and determine what that percentage should be if we're going to do that. I don't know that looking at the same percentages, because of the type of use they're doing, it is significantly different than other places. They're using primarily their own plumbing on board their boats most of the time. They use the restrooms on the pier and places in town, but not as much as a hotel stay or a resident would do. Solid waste is, there's some things they do and there's some things they don't do necessarily. So I think we can look at it, but I don't know if we need to do it. I think we should do it as a separate discussion, and if so, kind of determine what that parameter would be to increase those. But we did do an increase already in the last 12 months that I think it was probably 15
But it went
months.
from what to what? That $21 fee was probably $20 the year before based on a 2.6, right?
Likely, yes.
Okay, so if it was $56, it was probably 52 I mean, so you're not talking that much that we increased them then. So, well, I seem to be singing.
I think it's worth,
I
think it's worth bringing
solo
back
song.
for discussion. I don't think it's,
But if we adopt all these together, they would take effect on,
They would take effect on July 1 is what I think they're set to take effect.
which is our season.
right.
Oh, well. So, well, do you mind, anybody mind if they at least take a look? Or Cindy and Yesenia, you're saying absolutely don't touch our boaters.
I'm absolutely not interested. We just went through this a couple years ago, and I don't want to go through it again. We made the decision to increase the fees. We came back and we reduced them. And so I'm not in favor of looking at it, but if you have 3 votes from the other council, then it'll come back.
I mean, I would like, where we got kicked in the butt last time was with the liveaboards and the people that live on the island, right? That's why we changed it. We didn't change it because of the boaters from the mainland.
No, that is not a true statement.
Okay.
We lost a lot of our boater visitation to Two Harbors and other coves and a lot of Anchorage. And, you know, if you remember, there was a lot of issues with Anchorage at White's Landing and down that way because people didn't want to pay the higher rates, especially in the off seasons. So I'm just not in favor of increasing those fees. I think, you know, we have a small increase as proposed as far as the CPI and all the increases for fees. And I'm okay with that, but I'm not interested. I'm personally not interested in going any higher.
Okay, I would be curious, Matt and Orrin, to know, based on nights and whatever, how much money we actually think we would anticipate getting from these rates. There has to be some ballpark number.
So on the nightly mooring piece, so we make 1.7 million a year in nightly mooring rentals. So 2%, 35,000. Someone with a calculator can correct me if I'm
So we make 1.7 and we're raising it 2%, so you're saying that's another $30,000?
30 to 50,000.
That's it? To me, that's it. It's nothing. But, okay, well, we can approve them, and then if at some point, when we look at how much more money comes out of our general fund, because we're not going to have cruise ships coming, and we could always drop them, but if cruise ships aren't going to be coming till September, October, that's usually $750,000 that we're not getting and haven't gotten. So, I mean, it's kind of like this rate, this other stuff. That would be the maximum, but, you know, but we could always adjust it. So anyway. So what do you want to, those were all the questions I had on these. So if this council has any more questions, please bring them up. Okay, being there's no comments.
Is there any public comment?
There's no public comment.
Yeah. And we already closed it anyway. But, okay, discuss and determine appropriate fee increase. So if somebody can make a motion to just accept this as it is with, and then maybe looking at do it like this, but then were we going to exclude the code enforcement stuff in the vehicles, or are we going to approve it all at once and then still take a look?
We were going to approve it all at once, Annie, because it was going up at least the CPI, and then we can bring that back.
Okay.
As well as the transient rental one.
Okay. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the fee schedule as presented.
I'll second.
Yesenia's got it.
That's a tie. Did you get somebody, Denise?
Yesenia.
Okay.
Councilmember De La Rosa?
Aye.
Councilmember Lavelle?
Aye.
Councilmember Ponce?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Cassidy?
Aye.
Mayor Marshall?
Aye. Okay, item number 10, this seems like a little lighter one. Maybe.
Okay, this is reopening of the City Hall Council chambers. We are just proposing after June 15th, so our first meeting in July, this would apply. It would have the chambers at 50% capacity and wearing of masks, since we won't know who's coming into the chambers if they've been vaccinated or not. That's for the chambers. We are already offering services to the public. They just haven't been able to come into the City Hall lobby, and so we are proposing to open those doors, so we have one person would be allowed at any time at each of the windows, and they would have to wear a mask also, so no more than 4 of the outside people, residents or visitors in our lobby. Those are the things that we are throwing out to you and asking for your recommendation.
Are you moving all the staff back up to 40 hours a week?
Undetermined at this time, Mayor.
Okay. So I really like the still being closed on Friday. I think that's working quite well, and it does save us a little money. I guess the only recommendation that, or the thought that I might have, and you probably thought about it, is if we're bringing staff up to, so is it, are a lot of the people in here still at 20 or are they at 10?
The City Hall staff is at 20% furlough.
Okay.
The harbor is at 10% furlough, and fire department's at a 5% cut in pay on their hourly wages.
Okay. So on some of the administrative...
Oh, and Public Works is at 10% furlough.
Okay. So for some of the people here, if we had them working, for example, like the staff that's working here, well, I guess for admins, for people like Matt, we don't pay overtime, I don't assume. But for any of those that are, if they worked on some of those days, a 9 or 10 hour day, for example, maybe they start at 10 and get off at 7, whatever, they could work the council meetings and we wouldn't have to pay those folks overtime. If you're thinking of putting them a little more to work, and you know, maybe you can do it so that we increase our hours of operation, and those hours also would give them time to work on things when the public isn't around. And I don't know if staff would like that concept.
So still be closed on Friday.
Still be closed on Friday.
Yes.
We give them, those are at 20, if you wanted to eventually move them to 10.
2 4-10s.
Do them on like Tuesday, Wednesdays when we have council meetings and other things going on, so that we don't have to pay overtime.
Okay.
Other than that, I think you thought this out quite well.
Denise, I'm wondering if HR or the city in general is comfortable with allowing members of staff and or council and commissions that have been vaccinated to certify that they've been vaccinated if they choose not to wear a face mask.
I'd have to check with legal on that, of what we can and cannot.
Okay. I didn't know if that was something that Cal-OSHA is allowed for yet or not, but, which I'm assuming is the most restrictive of all the bodies, right?
So we were waiting for their final say in all this.
Yeah, Councilwoman, I read the initial draft of the OSHA guidelines, and they're not exactly clear, so we've asked for clarification of that exact issue.
Okay, thank you.
And I'm the one that asked Denise to put this on the agenda because I felt that the community was
ready for it,
getting really antsy that they wanted to attend meetings in person, which I would love to see, and I like the fact of 50%. But if wearing the face mask is the deal breaker, then I'd rather than stay where we are. But I feel comfortable with wearing the face mask and wanting people to. I've been vaccinated, and I'm not doing this for me. I'm doing it for other people, and it all goes back to the mask thing. And when we get a better clarification from both the CDC and the governor as to what the plans will be in the county, but I wanted to try to get. I like the 50%. I think the 50% is great.
I think it's a great starting point. I think we start with it and then go from there. Yeah.
Denise, do we have someone that would be able to, I know we have Dan that does the booth, and that's great, Dan, we love it. Is there someone that'd be able to do the chambers before the meeting and or after the meeting?
To clean the chambers, is that what you're saying? You're saying that? I will have to look into that. We don't have, as you know, we don't have a cleaning crew that comes through City Hall, and it's just internally staff wiping down things, so I guess that's something we can do, yes. Dan's just saying one of his recreation people could do that for us.
Thank you, Dan.
But is it necessary? How necessary is it?
It's a good preventative measure.
Yeah. Okay.
So do you have enough direction?
I think the consensus was to proceed as what's in our staff report.
Right.
Okay.
Item number 11, shoreboat operation.
Okay. As you know, in fiscal year 16-17, we went out for an RFP for the shoreboat operations. We received 2 proposals back, and it was awarded to Catalina Coastal Tours, LLC, DBA, Catalina Coastal Tours and Fishing. They entered into a 5-year agreement with the City of Avalon with no CPI on the contract, and so their current contract expires March 15th of 2022. We did meet with the contractors and to see if they were interested in renewing, because we wanted to be able to have time on both sides to discuss anything, as well as if we were going to have to go out for an RFP for it. They have proposed to us to increase the subsidy by 4.4%, and that would be for the 5-year period, not 4.4 every year like on a CPI, but just over that to the contract itself. So it's an additional $10,516. They've also proposed to raise the harbor fee from inside the harbor, which is $4 now currently, to $5, which is what it was before they took over, and to increase the fares outside the harbor by $2, which is currently at $5, to go up to $7. And then we would add some provision in our agreement about ADA accommodations that we will be checking with legal to see what our requirements are on that. This contract would not start until March of 2022. The reasons for their additional cost increase of that 4.4% is, as we all know, our raising cost of fuel, insurance costs have gone up, and we know that for ourselves through Parsac. The mooring fee increase, and then mooring maintenance fees increase, and then some litigation. We have 3 options. Staff is recommending to go forward with the request of the 4.4 increase, and we've discussed that with Matt and how that would affect our budget. If you don't make that, follow staff recommendation of going into an agreement with them, then your other options are to no longer provide that service, or you tell staff to go out for an RFP.
And again, Denise, because there was the 300,000 rides over the course of the contract, and so that's been for 5 years already?
So it will be 5 years next March of 2022, so they've got over an average of 70,000 passengers a year.
Okay. So 70,000 passenger a year, and you increase the fares by $1, that's $70,000 right there, right? Or you take $1.50 when you average it out, that's another $90,000, correct? That they would bring in. Something like that. Okay. Just wanted to make that point.
If there was a CPI in their contract to begin with, over 2 years, they would have already hit that $10,516.
Okay.
I don't think it's unreasonable, Mayor. Yes, I don't want to increase any contracts, but I guess that we need to determine if it's a service that's provided, that we need to provide to our boaters. And I think from the last time that discussion was had, that was definitely a a strong feeling of councils that yes, this is a service we should provide.
I totally agree, but I know we've got a trash contract and we got a shower contract, and we cut those and aren't going to get them up to whole for quite a while.
Not until we have cruise ships coming back in, because the price of their contract was based on our town being at 100%.
That extra money, though, also does yield the extra 7% harbor use fee. It increases that for us too, though, so it does bring in additional revenue to the city.
Yeah, that's true. I do know, I like the fact that he's open until, providing service till 1:30 or 2 in the morning on the weekends, because I know that takes
Currently,
the
it's
pressure
Friday
off.
and Saturday nights till midnight, and then, till 2 a.m. on the weekends, Friday and Saturday
No,
night.
and I think that's helpful, because then that doesn't put the pressure on the people that want to call the harbor department and say, take me to my boat. So.
And they can't do that.
Right, I know, but it takes the pressure off, because I know they'll try. So, okay, well, council, what's your pleasure, or what's your comment?
I would move to go with staff recommendations to continue the contract as stated, with the price increases expected from the shore boats, and to approve the city manager to negotiate the proposal terms with the contractor. Is that sufficient?
I'm sorry, I just had one quick question, and I didn't want to interrupt Lisa.
Sure.
The increase in the fares, will those begin at the onset of the new contract, or is that allowed to happen now?
That would be at the time we renew their contract next March of 2022.
Okay, and then just to clarify, we're continuing the contract from 2022 to
2027, it'll be a 5-year.
To 2027 for another 5 years.
Yes,
Okay.
yes,
I just wanted to be clear that it was going to go till March of 2027 at this point.
Yes.
Okay. With that, then I'll second Lisa's motion.
Councilmember De La Rosa. Oh, wait, is there any comments, Michael, on e-comment?
I have no comments.
Okay, one more question, then I'm sorry. So they're going to be getting 4.4%, tell me again.
One time.
One time, so it's not like it's going to, so it's not like a CPI that goes
Correct.
up and up and up.
One time.
Okay, okay.
Councilmember De La Rosa.
Aye.
Councilmember Lavelle.
Aye.
Councilmember Ponce.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Cassidy.
Aye.
Mayor Marshall.
Aye. Okay.
The next item on the agenda is closed session, and we are going into closed session for conference with real property negotiators. The property is 206 East Whitley Avenue. Agency negotiator Denise A. Ratty, city manager, and negotiating parties is Catalina Entertainment, Inc. It's under negotiation as the price and terms of payment.
Okay, and I'm going to take a little bit of break. It's going to take them a while to zoom. When you're back. And we are back from closed session.
There is no reportable action.
Thank you. Meeting adjourned. Good night, Tony.
Night, Tony.
Night.